So yeah, let's go for it.
Hey, you want to do the intro? Do the intro as you normally do.
I will do my usual intro. So welcome everybody to FMBug number 76, amazingly. We got various things going on tonight. We've got some of the usual stuff. I just want to have a little talk about dotFMP and engage you. A couple of FileMaker events. We've got Doug coming to talk to us about FileMaker 2024. And some, well, actually, he's going to talk to us mostly about new stuff in the pipeline, I think. We got Dom and Peter presenting their picking replay, which I'm really looking forward to seeing. And I think you'll find really interesting. And Ian is going to do a rehack, essentially, of his talk at dotFMP, which was about semantic search in FileMaker. And there's a question that someone wants to ask and that Gary's going to answer.
I'm going to try and answer.
You told me you
I'm
could
not going to say I'm
it.
definitely going to answer. I'm going to try and answer it
later on.
And I've got a scenario as well at the end that I want to go through with people, just as a pointer of something that we uncovered a few weeks ago. So it's just more information stuff. So I'll add that to the end. That's fine.
Okay, so usual format. We'll record until about 9. So if you've got anything you don't want on the recording, leave it till after 9. Or when we switch it off. Looks good for us if we can have your faces on video, but not if you don't feel like it, obviously. All the usual things. You all know how to use Zoom. We've all been to these events now for so many times. Let's kick off then. Gary, cool. You're up with the news.
Let's hope this works. Hopefully you can all see my screen. Fingers crossed. That's good.
Yeah, see your screen.
So first bits of news. I preclude this with everything that I've always done with the news, is the fact that thanks to Penny, that she does all the work for me. So it wouldn't be the news without Penny doing the research. You obviously know that 2024 came out, or 2021, or whatever number that FileMaker can't count. I'm not entirely sure. That came out, and there's a lot of buzz around it. There's an awful lot of feedback online. There's a load of information about what's good, bad, ugly, and God knows what else. I'm not going to go over that. To be fair, Doug's here later. You can ask him. So I'm sure he'll have the full rundown of what's in it. But I do have some links and some things that go through. So technical specifications from Claris. So if you've got any clients out there that need to upgrade to 2021, then, or 2024, I don't know which number to say. I think I'll say the year. I'll say the year to be consistent with FileMaker. You're going to have to then make sure that they are running. If they want to use the client, they can only access server 19.4.2. So if you want to use the latest version with the older server, I would keep them in tow, keep them in the same versions if you can. So that's fine. I thought it was interesting in the notes that if you've got any apps created using FileMaker Pro 12, there's a way to upgrade them. I was like, really? So I think the way to upgrade from FileMaker Pro 12 is use, this machine behind me. But yeah, there's an upgrade path if you've got older clients that are doing stuff and they need to upgrade. The important one thing I noticed is there's been some changes around the Mac OS, and that's normal, to be fair. So it's only supporting Ventura and Sonoma. That is a valid reason for that, because you won't get OS support on Mac OS 12 anymore from a security standpoint. Well, you'll get it until November. So in November, that OS will be obsolete anyhow. You won't get security patches. So it makes sense to upgrade. So you're going to have to upgrade the OSs. You might as well move to the later version. There's a load of slew of stuff of Ubuntu details in there, and which is the right version of Ubuntu to use and not, and so forth. So just make sure you're running the right LTS versions, which is long-term support. So you can't run the interim ones. So they only support the main ones. They've upgraded, I think they've dropped 2016 Windows as well. So that's now long gone, which is good because it was riddled with bugs and there was loads of updates for that thing, even though it's still supported. But now I would move, definitely, if my advice would move to 2022 anyhow, because there's a lot of changes in 2019. I think 2019 won't be long-term support for much longer on Windows. Next thing is there was an exceptionally good article from Soliant, and they went through all the different bits and pieces of what the changes were, the main areas around what has come in 2024. All these links I will post in the chat after I've done my news, so don't worry about writing them down, taking snapshots. I will put them all in the chat for you, don't worry. But that's a quick rundown. It was such a big article, Soliant decided to break it into 2 parts on their blog. I don't know whether they could post that much content on a single blog post, but so yeah, part 1, which is covering all this sort of stuff that they talk about the client. It's mainly about the client, part 1, and part 2 is predominantly about server. But they go through all the differences between what the versions are, what's changed. And when you get to the server stuff, there's a couple of things in here that I'm particularly interested in. Let's Encrypt SSL certificate is now supported in 2024. So I haven't read up on this too much, but because we're not moving yet, but we're going to be upgrading soon. But
there's a post about using Let's Encrypt. I think it's Soliant again, specifically.
Yes, I think there is, and it might even be in this news that I'll put together later on. But one of the things I'm hoping it's native, properly native, and it knows how to deal with that. And fingers crossed it will be. So if it is, that's great. There's a upgrade process. So if you need to upgrade in from server to 2024, Claris have done a process of what to do. So you can just follow their best practice on doing that. As I say, there's an awful lot of talk around on various sites at the moment of how to do this as well. The proof will be when the likes of us lot all have clients that we've done this, and then we say, yes, that process really did work. But it's relatively new, but it's nice. I support FileMaker for doing this. It's nice to have them go, we've looked at this and we found a best practice already. That may not fit everyone's scenarios, but at least they're doing the right thing and saying, we'll guide you and help you along the way, which I think is a great thing. Got another way of the databases. You can now upload databases via the admin API, which is nice. So they've improved that. So that's an improvement. It's a new approach that they've done for uploading databases to the server. So you don't have to use Pro and Upload anymore. You can push it through the API, which is nice. The only thing I did fathom is it's the note at the bottom, which is key. So if you've got large solutions, 4 gig for a file, it will fail. Just to let you know. So if you've got over a 4 gig file, you can't use the API. So I've got one of my files is 98 gig. So they ain't going to go. It's not going to go at all. So do bear that in mind. It is aimed at, I understand why. It's the technology. It's using an API. It's using a web call. It's doing some sort of backend web call. It's going to be limited by size. But just to bear that in mind. So if you're trying to upload to the server and it's over 4 gig, you still got to go back to the client anyhow. So yes, Let's Encrypt. It was in the list. Thanks, Jul. So it's in the list. The URL's there. I will be reading it when we upgrade. So because I want to move to Let's Encrypt ideally before my license runs out. So which I think the way we're going to do it, we'll probably move to Let's Encrypt before our SSL runs out using the current technology we're using, and then it'll get a lot easier when we move to 2024. The other things, there's various other online posts and bits and pieces on there, which I think is worth it. I do like Soliant. They're very good and they're very thorough in what they do, but there is also an awful lot of other things online. FMSoup's got a brilliant article where they did 2024's arrived, and the nice thing with that is there is a slew of comments on the bottom of that, so it's worth a read. So if you've got any scenarios, have a read of it, because there may be something in there where someone's gone, oh, actually, yeah, I did this and it didn't work for the following reasons. And you go, well, I've got exactly the same setup. I'll wait for patch 1 to come out, which will address the problem. So it's worth having a look. And the videos down there is, as I say, the market's gone pretty good. ISO magazine's got a really good article. They run through the new features. Richard Carlton does a good one of just like the top 10 key things you want to know from FileMaker 2024. And Productive Computing take a full under the hood scenario of it and have a look at it. The other thing I wanted to add is the Academy page has now come up. This is one that Penny mentioned, so she wanted me to mention it. So on the Claris website for the Academy now, there are training videos, there's various bits of information in there. It's a good look. I think if you've got any new talent coming into FileMaker, it's a really good foundation place to start. It'll give them an overview of what FileMaker is. It's the classic thing when you talk to people, and we've just had a new support member of staff, and we said, oh, most of our systems are in FileMaker, and he goes, what is it? I don't know what it does. I've got no idea. Bearing in mind, half the tools he's using on his desktop and on his machine is FileMaker driven, but he just wouldn't know, and he doesn't know the terminology, and he doesn't know what it is. But so if you've got new talent, or you've got someone that wants to learn FileMaker, have a look at the Claris Academy. It's up there now, so it's quite thorough, and it's a way to get someone on board. I think it's a useful training tool. There's more to discuss in the virtual bar, which will happen. I'm sure there'll be various topics from today's speakers that you can have a chat with. That'll be at the end. We always stop the recording, and it's a free-form, open discussion you can have. So do stick around, because you can ask questions and get answers as well. So, and that is the news. So that's the rundown of the news that I've got. So back over to you, Jul.
Excellent, Gary. Thank you very much. Thanks for that good rundown.
Cool.
Excellent. I've got a couple of little things I just wanted to talk about briefly. One of them is, bear with me 1 second. Yes. You go onto the, hopefully you can see my screen now. If you go onto the dotFMP Berlin website, unfortunately, this is the message you now see. This was a brilliant, fairly technical conference for developers, run by Egbert Friedrich mainly, pretty much single-handedly, as far as I can tell. And it was a great event, and it's he's decided not to run it again for various reasons that I don't know. But I just thought if anyone wants to pipe up and say anything about that, this would be a good opportunity for them to say anything. The only one I attended was the one online. I know Ian went to the last one, and Christian did. Not sure about anyone else. So this is your opportunity to say something nice about it, or whatever. And I think it's going to be a bit of a loss to the community personally, because I think it's a good chance for people to exchange a lot of ideas, a lot of very clever people. So I'm going to throw that open if someone wants to just jump in there and talk about that. Who went?
Okay, I'll go. Actually, I like that Christian is wearing a dotFMP shirt. So
Yeah, yes.
That's nice. Yeah, I'm really gonna miss it. It was 12 years, 12 really good years. Just great conferences, meeting a great bunch of people and learning an awful lot. And Egbert was just a fabulous guy. He told me it's because he had a fear of the number 13. So he didn't want to do a 13th. So
that was made up on the spot. But I like it. It's very
possibly. Anyway, so it's kind of it was a bittersweet one this year.
Over, I think 70 people or 80 people, I'm sure. It's very technical. It's English. It has for years been the only English-speaking conference for people from different countries, you know. Nowadays you have EngageU and there are more people going there, but I think it's not as technical.
Well, thank you guys. At least someone said something about it, something nice, which is good to hear. So I will feed that back to Egbert, but a couple of people said some nice stuff. So moving on to Christian mentioned EngageU. EngageU is, I said I'd give it a bit of a, I told Johan I'd give it a bit of a tout here, a bit of a promotion. It's on the 17th to 19th of November in Malmö at the Clarion Hotel Malmö night. So nice looking building. I will put the link in the chat. In fact, I'll do that now. I'll do that before I forget, otherwise I will forget to do it. There you go, links in the chat now. I suggest you go and have a link. There's they're hoping for about 250 attendees. The hotel and the conference are all taking part in the same place, which is really handy. Brad is going to come and give the keynote. And I think a few other people from Claris. Doug can no doubt tell me one or two of them. if you're interested. There is a very good looking agenda. Where have I put that? So I can just show you the agenda at the moment. So this gives you an idea of what the agenda is. So there's some sessions on the day before it technically starts, pre-conference day. And I think there's going to be some training then as well available. And then have a look for yourselves at these. It's all on the Engage You site. There may be a few changes to come. I don't know. That gives you a quick look at some of the things that are going to be there and some of the people. I will now move to the speakers section, and you can be impressed by the list of speakers. So, some very familiar faces in here. Those of you that came to Engage You in Antwerp will recognize a lot of them. Some of them you'll recognize from here. Christian, amongst others, Doug, Ian. So there's, go and have a look. See if you want to go. That's my punt for it. Anyone going?
I'm trying to work out my schedule, so I wouldn't mind attending it. So if I can, I'm trying to work out that I can go.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think I'm not going to be able to, which is really, really annoying. I think,
I'll just add that Square Moon and ClickWorks do a really, really good job of putting these things on.
Oh, excellent.
The last two have been just really, really good conferences.
I would like to add that for the hotel, I saw they have a conference rate. And then I checked on the website from the hotel without the conference rate and got a cheaper price for staying a few days longer. You know, leave earlier, leave later. So I got a different rate. And if you fly, the airport is Copenhagen. So
yeah, I mean the current conference price till the end of July is 649, as opposed to 799 euros. I'm talking. It's yeah. I mean, if I can go, I will go. I just think I'm not going to be able to, unfortunately. And I had the last one I went to, I really, really enjoyed and came away buzzing from it. So highly recommended.
Yeah, if you can just make it for the alcohol, that's fine. I think drinking a bit of booze is always a good idea.
Yeah.
That's why I go. I mean, there's not a lot I can do. So
Nice product. How are we on the schedule? Anyone else want to say anything about it?
The only other thing, as Christian said, the airport is Copenhagen, and you just go downstairs in the airport to the train station, and it's about a half-hour train ride from the airport.
Is it pricey?
I think it was something like 10 euro. Well, it was something in Danish crowns.
Yeah.
Not much.
No.
And we just went to a ticket machine, just bought a ticket. I think if you buy the ticket, the same ticket works also for buses in Malmö.
just make sure you wear winter clothes. Because the wind on the other side is just outrageous. Even in September time. So November time, you'll probably be snowing. And
Doug, are you ready? Just to jump in.
Yeah. Cool. I'll start.
The floor is yours.
Thanks. So I've got a bit of a cold flu, so I'll be talking with an ever stranger accent today. So yeah, I was going to talk about. So we had the launch of FileMaker 2024 about a month ago now. It will be a month in 3 days' time. And for those who've actually seen the community live session that we done on community, or some of the stuff that I've done with Kalman on Richard Carlton, one of the things that we are really trying to actually sort of get to is the feedback loop between Claris and developers. So one of the things we're trying to actually get to, and I know it's kind of hard and a lot of people think, well, it should be even quicker, is when we have new features, either through better messaging or through updates of the feature, we get people to actually kind of understand is why we've actually created a feature, where it's going, and what we were trying to actually sort of get out of it, and make it better for everyone. And in a lot of cases is we want feedback. We're fully aware that we're not just going to get positive feedback every time. We're going to get positive and negative feedback. But the idea is to really, instead of actually saying that, like we had a few of saying we are a bunch of complete idiots and we have no idea what we're doing, the idea is to go is, okay, this is my use case for my company. This is how I leverage FileMaker in my company. By having a feature working that way, it's going to actually either make it harder for me to be able to actually use it, or it's going to create issues that actually didn't were existing. So one of the features that we had in FileMaker 2024 coming out is a feature called Open Quickly. Essentially, it is built basically for a lot of use cases, but it's basically built for various type of users. So it's built, the idea behind it was just to make a developer's life kind of easier when they have like big solutions. So you all have big solutions, hundreds and thousands of layouts, you have thousands of scripts, you have fields everywhere, you have a lot of information. And sometimes it's kind of a bit of a pain when you want to go to specific scripts, everything has to be done manually. So we created this feature whereby you open quickly, you search for words, and then the engine can actually find it. So I'm going to quickly show you, for those who haven't seen it, how it works on the current version and some of the work that we're doing to actually get it to work on the next version. So where's my share button? Share screen, FileMaker Pro. I've got 4 different FileMaker Pro open, so I don't know which one. Like, wait.
Take one and hope for the best, Doug.
Yeah, and it's like that one's closed. Okay, there's one left. So if I share that one, it will be the correct one.
We're about to get a preview of 2027.
So this is FileMaker Pro, and this is version 20.0.53. So not the latest one, but maybe one after the other. Go away, cool. Close window. Damn it. Sorry, I'm going to share my screen because this is just... Stop sharing. Hang on. Why do they do updates of the software? It's so much easier when no one does any update. Eh? Cool. Okay, so this is FileMaker Pro running the latest version. Okay. So this is the file. So basically, I've got this open quickly. I can use it from here, or I can do directly OpenK, and I can search for that. So if I go in a couple of words, basically, it's going to show me currently files, and then it's going to show me tables. And if I do just see, it's going to show me basically some of the scripts that I have. And based on the privilege set, it's going to allow you to actually be able to actually run the file or actually go directly to it. So if my privilege basically doesn't allow me to go to such in file, basically, then I won't be able to actually go. So if I want to basically go to this layout, I'll just double click on it and it goes straight away to that layout. Currently, what it's looking for is through scripts, tables, relations, and I think that's pretty much it on that one. I can't remember, but so one of the things that we're trying to actually sort of get to is 2 issues that we're trying to fix. One of them being giving you kind of more information, so more results. So basically being able to actually search is inside of fields, inside of the relation graph, kind of everywhere. So if I do another one in here and I do contact, it's going to basically show me fields. If I do first name, it's going to basically show me the fields. It's going to give me a bit of more information into the systems. But whilst we're actually sort of doing that, last week we realized that having an icon doesn't mean anything for a lot of people. Like if I were to ask anyone on the room, I've just told you it's a field, but in a lot of cases, people actually do not know what it means. But if I double click on it, it opens up basically the managed database, it goes directly into the table and takes me directly to the field. So kind of an easy way to actually move around. The one thing we're trying to actually do on top of it is when you're doing a search, is to be actually to split it based on the type of result that it gives you. So we're going to separate the files from the tables, from the fields, from the pretty much everything, so that when you go through it, it's kind of easier to be able to actually leverage it. The other thing that we're playing on, and that's going to be available very shortly in the next ETS, is it will do a search and it will give you the top 10 results of the last things that you open. So for the files, it will give you the last 10 files that you had open. Same again for the field names, the table occurrences, all the stuff that basically you can actually search through just to make your life kind of easier. The other thing we're working on based on all the feedback from the community is currently the menu is available to everyone. So when you start Open Quickly, it's there, and then it's going to allow you to actually search on the file, just because when you open the file, it gives information about the file. But then depending on your privilege set, it's going to allow you to actually maybe search it, but not maybe go sort of into it. So the two angles we're working on is how to actually give control to the developer on how Open Quickly can be leveraged. The easy way currently is to go through the custom menu. And when you're creating a custom menu, you can directly deactivate Open Quickly. So if you're already leveraging custom menus and you don't want end users to be able to actually use it, then you just basically untick it and no one's going to be able to actually sort of play with it. But we do realize in some cases, people haven't, even though they've actually created correct privilege set, they haven't actually leveraged custom menus. And to create a custom menus for just one use case of remove Open Quickly is kind of a pain. So the idea is basically is for us to play around to figure out where we actually give the option for people to actually turn it on and off. The one area that we're working on is to actually have it within your privilege set, because we already have the option to control printing, exporting, which is pretty much one of the menu that's already there. So for most of users, it will be easier for them to figure out where to actually control it. But we are looking at different ways to be able to actually do it. I think we're going to try to actually do this with this, give it to the community, get some feedback from the ETS, and see whether we want to leverage that. The one thing I want to make clear people understand for the community is that feature is not going away. Like, we have people complaining that it should be completely taken out because it doesn't work for their use cases. But we have hundreds of thousands of companies using FileMaker. We've got to cater for everyone. So the feature will stay, which is going to give the developer more control over how and who can actually leverage it. But that feature isn't going away. Just want to make sure people understand that, because there was a lot of people going, it was a bad idea, but it's helping a lot of people, especially new developers. When they create a new solution, it's making their life a lot easier. So we want to make sure we keep that feature for those new type of users. There's a lot of new things that we're working on for the future of FileMaker. So there's going to be a FileMaker 21.1. Which we're hoping will probably come out when we have the update of macOS. So it's going to be called Sequoia this year. It normally comes out October time, so we're going to try to actually have it coming out October time. So if like Apple does it every year, we'll probably have a 20.1 coming out around the before the Engage You, so we'll have able to actually talk about that. And there's quite a lot of small features that we're bringing to the community. So if you're part of the ETS, you'll get them very shortly. But it's a lot of the small things that people are requesting, trying to see whether if we bring them, it's going to make everyone life a lot easier. But hopefully, it should do the trick. And then there's quite a lot of stuff that we're doing on the AI side of Claris to make it easier for people to start leveraging AI inside the FileMaker, because it's kind of a steep sort of hill to climb to be able to figure out what AI can do in your FileMaker solution. So on the angle that we're doing is to make it really easy for the AI to communicate with your data, and at the same time trying to give you some use cases of what you can do. The other thing I want to talk before we do questions is, so last week I was in stop sharing. So I was in Naples, in Italy, because the Apple Developer Academy that's based in Naples had a end of year kind of party in something they call the Future Fair. And the reason actually FileMaker is involved with the Apple Academy is because we have groups of students in the academy that leverage FileMaker for their solutions. So for those who've never heard, basically the Apple Academy is a global initiative by Apple where they work with local universities. So they've done stuff in Brazil, Italy, Malaysia, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, the US now in Detroit, and Korea. I think that's pretty much. They've got 18 stuff around the planet. The one reason actually like FileMaker around it is because they've actually noticed from the students who've actually did a bit of FileMaker at the academy, they've been able to get jobs as FileMaker developer really quickly, and they've able to actually sort of stick on that jobs because what they've actually been figuring out is becoming a FileMaker developer in a company is a lot more rewarding than actually being just a coder inside a company. So they really like the angle of the FileMaker way of looking at become problem solvers. One other thing that we're looking for is we are looking for companies willing to actually have students maybe coming in for internship for 6 months or even being offered jobs as FileMaker developers. A lot of them are actually based in Italy, but a lot of them are actually looking to move to other countries inside Europe. So if you're looking for junior developers that have not just an understanding of FileMaker, but other technologies, essentially iOS, and are coming in a lot of cases from humanities studies or math studies, a bit of everything, but they have a vision of not being coders but developers. Give us a shout and then see whether we can actually put you sort of together and see whether you could actually offer them some jobs or even like internships. It's getting a lot of important people from Apple looking into that. Like last week, we had Lisa Jackson, so she's the senior VP of the social initiative and the how to work with education around the planet. And they kind of like what we have with the Claris sort of, well, especially the FileMaker developer community of people being formed to do real jobs that stick with the FileMaker world, that stick with this type of work and actually do make good salaries and there's future for them. So if anyone's interested, give me a shout and we'll see whether we can actually produce some stuff in touch with some of them. So that was pretty much what I had to tell you for this week. Open to questions if you had any of them.
Yeah, I think you'll find Tony's got a few in the chat there if you've got the chat window.
So multi-file script steps will be able to jump. Yeah, so one of the things that, and I can't show it because it's still basically in development, but we're trying to figure out a different way to be able to actually show where, like within the search box, when you search for a script steps, whether you search for the script's name, it could actually sort of give you like an indent on where that is positioned. So if you wanted to do a search for a specific script steps inside a specific folder, you would kind of be able to actually sort of do it. So the engineer is working on being able to actually kind of do indents within the result so that you have a multi-like kind of, it shows you in a better way where the stuff is actually located. Because the thing is, originally we were trying to do something like a bit like Spotlight, and Spotlight is actually very basic. Like you do a search, it just gives you a result of where the file is located. That's pretty much it. With for FileMaker development, you need to actually a bit more like, so we're trying to work out how we can actually do that to look kind of nice for you and kind of user friendly for everyone.
It would be nice, Doug, if we could have maybe just sort of if we commented the first line of a script, we could see that comment with the result.
Yeah. So we're trying to figure out how we do it without going into something realistic that it completely moves away from the principle behind it of open quickly. Like if you do open quickly and you have a result of 20 script steps and then 20 files, it's no longer open quickly, it's open messy quickly. So we want to stay out of that.
So Doug, if and everyone, if I may jump in, it's a very cool feature. I use a tool. One of my favorite developer tools is 2Empower FM. I think it is Dev Tool Assistant. Everyone should buy a copy. You know, that all said, some of the functionality that you're kind of rolling out here is similar to what's there, which is incredibly useful. I want to give you a little bit of a why do I care, or as you would say, use case. You know, we'll sometimes have occasion to deprecate code, like we might have used the base elements plugin prior to FileMaker 16 to implement some JSON functions. And true story, we're just, you know, pulling some of that out. And the ability to find strings, whether it's in the presented text of the script workplace or in the underlying XML, is incredibly useful. And the ability to go there, as you demonstrated for some of the FileMaker code objects, is incredibly useful because, you know, it's one thing to run a DDR. The analytical tools are great. Monkey Bread is also great, by the way. Hi, Christian. But, you know, the ability to go clickety-click and then jump to the particular script step that you want to remove, perhaps because it's invoking indirection that you want to pull out, or the previous example that I mentioned. Anyway, this is exciting stuff, and I would say carry on.
I see break his hand.
And again, we want to keep it like we don't overdo it. Like he's saying, 2Empower FM and then MBS, they do a lot of great stuff already. We don't want to have to actually sort of go into their world. And we want to make sure that it kind of lives for every type of customers that we have. So I had talked with other sort of partners that were kind of complaining that it's not techy enough. But if we take it too far, then for the kind of newer entry or people that have been doing FileMaker for 5 years, it's going to become a bit too complex. We're trying to actually make it easy for doing the specific stuff that it's meant to be doing, but not overdoing it into a point where the story around to explain what it does becomes 5 hours discussion, and it becomes meaningless afterwards.
I think
It makes sense.
John, do you want to go? Because you were saying you wanted to ask a question, John.
Yeah, so for those who haven't played with it a lot, for something to appear in the open quickly, it has to be ticked in its particular menu. So a layout has to be ticked for it to appear in open quickly. And so does a script. So I have a question for Doug, which is the default behavior when you create a new layout or a new script is for this to be turned on. And then people have 500 scripts because they haven't actually bothered to go and turn them off. Given that I know there's some other work going on with what should be on by default, either this should be like a user privilege at some higher level. I should be able to say, tell you what, I don't want any new layouts. So like there's the thing that says add new fields automatically when you create them is an option. There should be an option that says don't automatically tick a script, don't automatically tick a layout. That will reduce part of the thing. What Doug didn't properly show, which is one of the questions, is yes, if you go into the manage FileMaker database, manage database graph and use open quickly in there, it will jump to a table occurrence, which is completely fabulous and worth the money just on its own. But the other thing is that the files that appear in your list come from your recently opened files. So if you don't want things, to show in the list, you have to go and kind of keep cleansing that on a regular basis. So yes, if somebody opens a thing, so Gabe's question about, if you're in another file, can you see this other one? Well, yes, but only if it's ticked. So yes, it's true, you can turn things off with a privilege set, but you can also turn things off by unticking them, just like willy-nilly, which just means more discipline for us as developers to control the environment for the users. But it would be great if that was could I have it off all the time?
Yeah. So the idea is to put it in one place where it's kind of easier for the developer to go across that file for that privilege set. This is what I wanted to do. So I'll probably go in the privilege set because it's where we can control based on the various sets that have been created. But we'll find a way yet we have all the feedback. We're just trying to say is if we put it here, do the work, it should please pretty much 80% of the community, and that will be good enough. But like I'm saying is, I don't want to make it too complex, because suddenly after that it just gets messy and the value behind it just goes away. So.
But the other thing is, if you alt click a selection in the open quickly, and it's like a layout, it'll open it in a new window.
Yeah.
But that shortcut isn't like obvious unless you're an obsessive click everything and see what happens person.
Yeah.
So can I just add to that? So, right, okay, it's based on the privilege set. We don't use it. I'm nowhere near that level of version. So, but I know I will be at some point. Okay, and as you rightly said, Doug, is not going anywhere, so it's fine. I like the idea of what it's trying to do. Totally idea, love it. We go to the point in some of our applications to make the user only stay in one window, John, because the performance of FileMaker won't allow it to go to multiple windows. So if I'm now giving the user the opportunity to quickly open 50 different layouts very easily in an interface, that is disastrous, absolutely disastrous for us, because it just doesn't work that way. We don't want the system to work that way. We built it to work a different way.
But
so we don't have people open multiple layouts. We don't even allow them to open multiple windows, because that affects the performance of FileMaker. You're giving them the opportunity to completely circumvent the code that we've got to say open a new window.
Unless you
based
turn
on what
it
John's
off.
just said. Yeah, unless you turn it off. Yeah. And the other thing is, we don't even as developers going to define fields in the working hours of the day. Because we don't. I've got too many big systems. If I open up define fields on one of our solutions, it's going to open probably 70 odd databases across 3 different servers.
Yeah, but in order for your users not to be able to define fields, you have a custom menu so that they can go into it. Do you have custom menus for your users?
Well, define fields is a different one because it's privilege set. So no one can do that. They don't have the ability to define fields or go into edit scripts because they don't have that option. So that's fine. But even us as developers, now, Command K on the Mac operating system is connect to server. How many times are going to press that button and instead of connect to a server, open up a search box into FileMaker? It's just...
So do you have custom menus for your users?
Occasionally, until it failed and broke and I had to turn them off. So no. So at times I had custom menus that crashed the file when I had custom menus on, so I had to take the facility out because it crashed the file. So we did have custom menus, we've turned them off because it's too volatile, not stable enough. To be perfectly frank and honest, that's fine. But I'm happy to take this offline, have a discussion with you later. So this fills me with complete and utter dread at the moment. I would not be happy with this as a function. And that's why I like the fact I agree, you're not doing what Christian's system does for monitoring scripts. That's a plugin we put on and only our developers have, so therefore no one else can do it. We have full autonomy and full control over those sort of functions. So I can give that plugin to a user that I can trust and knows how to use it. If this becomes blanket, carpet bomb, I've got 200 users that could then end up doing this simultaneously. The other question on what is the load? So if I do a search for that, what is the load on the system to do this? So if I do a search and I've got a massive database which has got, I don't know, over 1,000 different fields in 250 different tables, and I've got a massive solution, I do this search, what's the load?
It's doing in the cache of what's in your file locally. It's only doing stuff that it knows it's there. So it's basically looking the cache of everything that's been grabbed from the server to your local cache. And that's where it does a search. And
it only searches field information. It doesn't search within the fields. No, it's just schema information.
Yeah, schema information. So anything that is in the cache of what the file basically already has.
Yeah.
I think, Gary, you need a little bit of discipline, a new discipline for developers to say, yeah, fine, do the quick search, but don't click on that because that's going to screw it up.
Oh, we do that all the time.
Yeah.
We have that internally. That's my point. The point is though, is if it goes in a menu list, and as you rightly say, Doug, it's unclear when you've got thousands of elements. You click on it, you've opened defined fields now. It's too late. You've already done it.
Well, if you haven't got the privilege set, you won't be able to actually go there.
our developers got the privilege set to do everything all the time because our developers have got it. But I don't want our developers wouldn't even use this because we wouldn't structure it that way. We choose not to press Shift Command D in working hours. All right, it's that simple. So,
Okay.
and Shift Command D doesn't conflict with any other app that I know of at the moment. It's quite unique. Whereas Command K is connected to server, and I'm connected to servers 24/7 in various environments. If I happen to do that in the front FileMaker window, I've now invoked a quick search. Fair enough, it'll pop up a search and I don't have to do anything. It should be enough to stop it. Maybe I'm creating a mountain out of a molehill, but initially I'm looking at this going, wow, that's a concern.
I think there are some use cases that we have to work out if, for us, that is helpful to have off. So one of the ones that I flagged up first is if you open a file that's hidden as a support file, it just opens, but users never ever see it. And then you do Command K and go, oh, that looks interesting. I'll click on that. Of course, it then opens the file, but it also runs the onOpen script to do that. And the onOpen script may do some things to your environment that you didn't necessarily want. Let's say it changes the global variable for navigation, and you didn't intend for that to be the case. That's why, but that's a use case where you have to go, that's why I have to be really careful if I'm using that technique a lot. I think it's understanding how and where it works. I'd also be on Doug's side and going, it's brilliant for the right use case.
I see the benefits. I do see the benefits.
However, if you have, 30 tables and they all have a field called _modified timestamp, and you search for modified, you're gonna get 30, and you don't know which one it is. It's an issue about working out. It does feel like a V1 feature, and I think Doug would agree. It's brilliant and it's doing a great job, but we have to work out where we should turn it off, how we should control it, what are the use cases where it is very useful. And
I'm not being negative about what the service offers. I think it's a good service. I think it's a great feature. It's a feature that we've been crying out at developers. Yes, we buy God knows how many plugins, tools, and things to make our lives easier. This is now going to come out of the box. I'm not against it at all. I'm just frustrated from the rollout point of view because I work with 4 or 5 different other software vendors do other things. And 2 of them I know, when you go to advanced features, they have a section for new features from the last 5 releases, and it's just a radio button. You turn it on when you want, but by default, it's off. So if I roll out anything new on a new version, I'm talking about Click here, if I roll out a new version of Click, if I go into the admin of Click on the cloud, all of the tick boxes of all the new features that came out in the last 3 months are all off. And I just turn the radio button if I want them on, and then they're turned on in the system. That's a really good implementation way of doing something. Having it default on, just given to everyone, and you've got developers here that have built systems over 20 odd years. If I have to go in, I saw a post, I think it was posted online, I think it was from Monkey Bread, I think, doing the code that you need to put in the script. Well, that's great. I've got a bloody lot of work to do now to control that, because I didn't have it before, I didn't need it before, now I've got to control it. And that's my thing. So I think it is about that implementation. It's about that, how easy is it to turn it off? I think if you set the privilege set for the user in the security for privilege set, it will probably be perfect. No problems at all, because I can just by default go, bang, that's off. I know no one but a developer then got that file, got that function. I don't make users to do anything, Doug, apart from use the application I put in front of them. So,
cool.
But I'm not against it, but I'll see when we get closer to that version. So
I think there's a slight change in mindset as well, because we've always had this idea of security by obscurity, where if we don't give the users a button to go to a layout, then we don't necessarily need to specify for every single layout which layouts they have access to. Obviously now with Open Quickly, if the user has it enabled in their menu, and if they have permissions to see that layout, then yes, they can jump to it. And if it's and if we leave it on in our systems, then yeah, there is the chance that users may be able to get to a layout without some context or in a way that we hadn't necessarily kind of expected. I think we just need to be aware of that as kind of developers and ensure that we're building our systems in a way that either we are using the custom menus and we're using go to layout, or we're using these kind of lists in there. I think it's just another thing we have to just be aware of to make sure that are we being a bit more restrictive about what we actually allow users to see, what layouts they are in their go to layout menu, because if it's in there, then they can find it in the open quickly view. That's my view on it.
As I think I did, like the scripts having the point of command 0 to 1 to auto fire the scripts in the menu option. So it's that sort of thing. So we've known this for years, that we work around those problems. If we need scripts in there, we'll add a load of, I've got a solution that's got 9 scripts that do nothing, but it's got a logo in it, because that then moves all the other scripts down so no one can press a function button to do something. It's that methodology of how to do stuff. If I need stuff in the script menu that is easier for me to use, we've made these workarounds. When the new functions come in, it's just the work we need to do, Doug. It's understanding the impact, and I think that's the concern. So,
I think it maybe is time to give custom menus a try. They've been, I think, pretty reliable for a lot of people for a lot of years, and I know we certainly get a lot of value out of them.
No, I'm not disputing it. It was one solution that had a problem. We do use them across the board. So we've got a large stack, and we do use them across the board. But I know in that one file we turned them off, and it was a safer option because it didn't cause problems. So, but yeah, look, we'll see what happens. I think keep us informed, Doug, of where you decide you're going to put the controls. I think that's the key thing.
Thank you for the feedback.
Cool.
Hey, one quick closing thought. Just, Doug, want to make sure you see it. First off, I got to say, I see this primarily as a developer feature. I think that in terms of the users, we can build what they need. The privilege head checkbox idea sounds like a productive route to go. That sounds, spot on decision, if you ask my opinion. What I dropped in the chat is the DDR. When you run a DDR, and I think this addresses some of the questions that Gary brought up about, big systems. When you run a DDR, the user interface, pre-existing code, gives you an opportunity to select a subset of files, should you so choose, as well as a subset of objects. And if I, as a developer, wanted to get a rapid response in terms of what script steps I want to look for across what files, that particular interface would be, I'd say, rather efficient. Anyway, good.
Okay, yeah.
Good feature. And then apparently the chat is posted later to the FMBug website. I saw that mentioned. Can't download the chat for some reason, but apparently it gets posted later.
Yeah.
Or
yeah,
copied and pasted in real time. Thanks.
No worries. I will keep going then. So
yeah, I think I'm.
Oh, you're back on. You're back on, Jul.
Sort of back.
Really, sort of back. So the wonderful world of technology and laptop crashing.
Yeah, it's just great when your laptop crashes halfway through one. Right. And thank you very much, Doug, for presenting that.
It is historic warehouse picking system. So I'd be curious to see this, Dom. I mean, I'm going to be impressed with this, mate.
Yeah. So just jump in there, Dom.
Well, when I'm ready, you want to put the screen over to me? So we have had a requirement to reorganize our warehouse. Some of our aisles aren't compliant with health and safety. So some of our aisles, the width of the aisles aren't compliant with health and safety regulations. For example, this aisle here is a few centimeters too narrow. So as we often do, if we have to do something, we look for an opportunity to say, well, okay, are there other things we can do around this that might help the business? So in many ways, what follows is an example of how if the only tool we have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. We had a meeting coming up. We wanted to present information to that meeting, and we wanted to do it in a way that was immediately understandable. What we came up with is a map of the warehouse, which is pretty much a throwaway project really, but it has caught people's imagination and served its purpose quite well. We wanted to persuade the rest of the COP that time spent thinking about our warehouse layout would repay us in terms of increased efficiency, and unbelievably, some people do not find this as fascinating as we do. And Point Blank refused to read the 300-page document on warehouse distribution science that we had sourced for them. So we thought we would come up with something just to catch their attention, to try and get our message across in an easily understandable way. We wanted to present a large data set in several different configurations, as I say, in an immediately understandable way, hence our warehouse heat map. Now, we want to grow the business, but we don't particularly want to take anyone else on at the moment. Collating is one of the most labour-intensive jobs here at the warehouse, and our collators are pretty much at the limit of what they can do in a day. So we can't take on any more collating without taking on any more collators, or can we? Yeah? So, as the saying goes, give a collator a fish, and tomorrow they will still want to employ more collators because they want to reduce their workload. However, if you can increase each collator's efficiency by 5 to 10%, then you can increase the amount of orders you can collate without taking on any more collators. So we had a look at a document called Warehouse and Distribution Science, which I will show you a summary of. We'll leave that with the pig map then, but I'll put the link in the chat. So it's a 300-page document with mathematical formulas justifying why you should put what where in a warehouse. Now, there aren't a lot of new ideas there really, but the key one that we were looking at was reducing travel time for collators. Okay, so the other things we were looking at were convenient picking locations, golden zones, forward or fast picking areas. If I show you this, are you able to see it? See that?
Perfect.
See that?
Yeah,
okay.
perfect.
So that's an example of an aisle that's too narrow. Lovely. And working our way through that document, which is a summary here and the real thing there, well worth reading through. One of the concepts they were looking at was convenient picking locations. And given that our start and end point for our collating is the same here, if you attended our warehouse talk, you remember that you've got a ramp going from our goods in to our main warehouse. That gives us a set of convenient picking locations that fall within these two triangles. So what we're trying to do is think about how we reduce travel time, creating a forward or fast picking area, how we create optimum picking paths, and how we explain all of that to the rest of the co-op. How do you say to them, well, this is what we want to do. How do you understand that? And this is what we came up with. If we populate this in this way, and the top one, then the key here is the lightest colours are the least frequently picked items, going through to your reds, which are your more frequently picked, going through to your blues, because I ran out of reds, which are your most frequently picked items. So this is what we would call a heat map of our warehouse, with each picking location represented by a square and each picking location color coded according to the number of products picked from that location in 2023. So if we click on some of these, we can see in 2023, we picked 3,713, 20 by 6 by 1K jumbo oat flakes from that location. Up here, 5,724 products were picked from that location. And again, if we think about where our most convenient picking locations are within this triangle, you can see that we've got a lot of very light colors. So some of the most convenient picking locations are being criminally underused, is what we would suggest from that. But it's not just the quantities that are picked from the picking locations that we're interested. We're also looking at the frequency with which those picking locations are visited. So if we populate it with this one, it comes as little surprises. There's a bit of a correlation between the two things there, but there are some slight differences. So that's 0. I'm just going to populate again with those. Now, what we want to do, as I've said, is to reduce travel time. About 55% of collating time is spent traveling from one location to another. The idea being, if we can reduce that travel time, we can increase the amount that each collator can pick, and we can increase the number of orders we can pick without increasing the number of collators we have. Now, we are thinking obviously about how we group products together, and there are several factors that you might want to think about when you do that. course, popularity of the product is one. You might also want to think about what product is picked along with what other product. Is product A always picked alongside product B? We're also thinking about what is picked first, what goes onto a pallet first, what goes onto a pallet last. Now, we have several different customer types, and unfortunately that means that we're not going to be able to achieve a one-size-fits-all warehouse. We've got different types of customers, different types of orders. But what we wanted to do was to give the collator the ability to create for themselves the optimum picking paths by laying out the warehouse with all the above in mind: travel time, convenient picking locations, golden zones, forward or fast picking areas, pick density on shelves, the way of grouping products, and at the same time give a collator some clear rules on how to build a pallet, heavy at the bottom, light on top, and at the same time as we do that, giving a collator a clear mental map of the warehouse, which means dedicated picking locations instead of shared picking locations. Now, you can spend a lot of time and money on generating optimum picking paths, but we're going down the cheaper route, trying to use our collator's common sense. Now, I'm going to hand over to Peter, and he's going to talk to you about a couple of different picking methods and show you an order being picked. Because we're showing this as a static thing, which is great because the people at our warehouse immediately get what we're talking about. But there's another way of using this tool, and I'm literally going to hand you over to Peter.
Good Lord. Good evening. So what we've done, or what Don did, is he's allowed this a marvelous thing to be populated. If we take an order, for instance, and organize it in the order in that it was picked in the in time sequence, there we are. Then we can watch. So this is an order for our shop. Now it doesn't include because they order in separate ways, it doesn't include the pre-pack. So it completely ignores, I'm pointing at the screen, but it's here. Pre-packs are in A and A, B, C, D, E effectively. So this order effectively misses out those sequences, those areas. So here it goes. This is an order as it's picked. It's an absolutely marvelous thing. Glory, glory, glory. It isn't actually picked this quickly, tragically. If it was, we wouldn't have any problems. But what we can do now is, so as you could see, if you're watching that carefully, how the orders are sequenced at the moment is in a snaky format. So the collator will start up here at A50 and will go, generally speaking, up and down the warehouse 10 times, I think it is, until they finish the order. So what we've been trying to think, and what we can do is we can model, do that one again, why not, because it's brilliant. So we can see how it happens in the sequence it is picked. So what we're going to do with this tool is try and reorganize our warehouse virtually so that we can then run an order, a sequence of orders, a day's picking, a week's picking, whatever, and see how, when we move product around, it improves. So what are we thinking? We're going to need your input into this, really. So this is the layout of our warehouse as it is at the moment. It's got a cut through, the ramp comes down from goods in, it's got cut through straight through there. It's got a small sequence there of whatever it is, dozen pallets, another cut through here, and then a long sequence here, a long sequence here. So let's see, we were looking at our wonderful document, which was positing these two methods of picking. This is the one that we've got at the moment. So we snake pick up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And the other suggestion is that you do a branch pick, where you'd have a central sequence of very, very valuable locations, and anything less would be branching off to the side. So what, having looked, should minimize. So having looked at our products, we've got 5,500 products, I guess, and there are some extremely popular ones, but they're quite limited. So we have an awful lot of middle range products. So what we decided, my first idea was that we could do a snake, we could have all the popular products in this area here, in A15 to A24, well, all pallets, 15 to 24, but the area isn't big enough. So we have, is that it? Yes. Okay, so we are investigating moving the cut through here up so that we have a central section here, which is much wider. So what's that? That's well, it's 20 odd pallets rather than 12, 24, twice as big. So what we're working on is a snake picking route around here with all the popular products, and then the less popular products we would branch off here, which would mean that if someone was picking an order, if the majority of the stuff was there, they would be walking literally half the distance. That's about it, really. And as I say, what we need to do, what we can now do using this, what Dom has built, is we can change all the locations on the system without moving the products around and see how that's going to work out. And what we want is some really bright ideas from you lot. Dom's back.
Right, so that's about it. I mean, you know, in summary, it's technically, it was so dodgy doing this, I wouldn't even host it on the server. It is one record, over 1,000 fields, yeah? But it wasn't intended for anything other than a meeting where we've got to say to people, you're not very engaged with this data, right? We are. Here's something you can understand. So if we populate this layout with the moved cut-throughs, then straight away you can see some, without moving any products, just moving the cut-through, you can see that some of the more popular products then appear towards the end of the snaky picking, this snaky picking area that Peter's just been talking about. If we go back to the previous layout, you can see that some of those more popular products are now halfway up an aisle. Again, we're talking about reducing travel time for collators, because we know that the majority of collating time is spent traveling from one place to another. We want our collators to do more. We don't want to take on more collators. We want to collate more orders. So some of these concepts, convenient picking locations, reducing travel time, forward picking areas, are what we're working towards trying to achieve. And this has just been a bit of a fun way of showing people who aren't so engaged straight away and immediately what we're talking about. And as far as that goes, even though I did it as a bit of a joke over a long weekend, it's actually been incredibly successful at winning people over to our way of thinking. That's your lot.
First thing, Dom, I think this is great. Absolutely stunning. So pat on the back, mate. So trying to explain to a team of people, pickers, collators, whoever we want to call them, that they're spending too much time walking from one bay to another is almost a pointless task. It's impossible. They don't get it. They don't understand it. This is great. If you can put anything visually in front of someone, I think you're halfway there. So no, seriously, this is sterling job, cracking job, mate. As for really laying it out, I think you're partway there with the single snake. That's similar to what we do. The only things I would add is seeing your warehouse, because I did come to the thing where we came to your warehouse and had a wander around. The only advice I have is, do you have multi-bay picking for a single product or not?
No.
Yes.
Right.
Only,
I beg your
only
pardon.
just. Yeah, we have a couple of products that have more than one bay.
So I think down here is what Peter's talking about. So foamable Oatly barista drinks, that would be a huge seller. The reason you're not seeing a bay there is because that the picking location stretches across 2 bays. So yeah.
Right. The reason why I'd say that is the fact that some of the things we've looked at from what we do is the fact that you speed up time for your stock management getting it into the warehouse because you don't care, you just put it in any slot. That then really has a knock-on effect of your efficiencies walking around the warehouse. So what you can do is you can then grade your stock based on the data you've got of how often they're picked, and you can then get the system to say, right, as you're booking in the next lot of whatever it is, it goes, right, I'm going to prioritize putting that in pick section A, which is primary section, and you could have multiple bays. So you grade your bay sections by its level of pick. So you still use the whole warehouse, you just move them around. So you could have one item sitting, if I'm looking here where L24 is, you could have it that it goes, as you're booking it into the warehouse, the stock, it goes, I've got some half a pallet space on L24 and I know that's a prime stock place. I'll stick it right close to the first pick option. Therefore, it doesn't really matter. The system doesn't matter. Depending on how your products work and how you pick, that may be different. So if you're more bulk stuff, you're going to have full pallets. And I've seen your warehouse, quite a lot of your stuff is like that. So
it is, but you're exactly right. These are our bulk locations here. I would consider these to be the most convenient picking locations, not just because the aisle widths are sufficient to allow 3 pallets to pass side by side. So if you're going to create a congested area by putting all your popular products in one place, these are very good aisles to do it.
Yeah.
But not only but as I said before, 60 cases picked from one picking location over a year, it's criminally underused from my point of view.
Yeah.
Given that it's got a prime location, we want to be moving that stuff over here and moving this stuff over there.
Yeah. And I think as a starting point, redistribute your warehouse based on the data you've got here, which is great. And then my added point to that is if that doesn't seem to be working as efficiently as you wanted, I think it's then creating more dynamic possible bays to go, right, we're going to utilize a half bay that we got at the top. There's one there that's got 4, I think, just above P27.
Yeah.
It's got 4, and you're like, well, that shouldn't, nothing to the right of those arrows should be anything but green, I would have said, or red.
No,
and I agree with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. But we have some resistance to overcome because reorganizing the way we're talking about would take longer to put away. So the guys who are putting stock away, they want to put away in terms of suppliers. They want to go to a run of bays and say, I've got an order from one supplier. I want to put that away in one hit in one location. And we're saying to them, that might be good for you, but that's not good for the collators.
Yeah.
And the whole point here is to facilitate collating, not facilitate putting away.
It's got to be.
And that's exactly what we do. We don't care. An item of stock in the warehouse is an item of stock. We don't care what it is, who it belongs to. The system tells me where it is, who it belongs to, and how long it's been there. So we just put it in whatever space we can find available, and we would then put it to our forward picking areas if it's a brand new item that we've got a history with it. So from our point of view, Batman comic comes out, it goes at the very front because it's going to be picked thousands of units within 24 hours of it landing in the warehouse. It goes to prime location number 1 because that's the place it needs to be. But you've got a lot more product and a much bigger warehouse than I've got. So yours is a bit more logistically challenging.
Well, it's because we have different customer types whose order picking is markedly different. Manufacturers, they're all going to want bulk. Corner shops, branded goods, individuals, private punters, 2s and 5s. You know, so we can't do a one size fits all, but we can persuade people that with a bit of effort, and as I said, with moving the cut throughs, because we've got to move a lot of this racking anyway, even without moving products, we're suddenly giving them a better path around the warehouse with more popular products just off the cut throughs. And that in itself, we're hoping should be a good move. Yeah.
I think
one thing you could think about doing when you're talking about picking products together, you could take every single product and produce a matrix against every single other one. So for every single time a product appears on the same order as another one, add a count next to that one. So what you basically build is you build which products are most popular and also which products are most likely to be shipped together. So every single product, how many times it's been on an order next to another one. Then what you do is you start from that central line as you're going up and down, and you kind of fill from the center out. But rather than just evenly distributing or doing them simply by their popularity, by using their actual location, so they're co-located next to those next most likely kind of products. Because then if you're cutting down, you may always have to cover the entire up and down, but if you can pick 3 items that are closer to each other, and it means you don't have to go down every single aisle, you might find that that would reduce.
And the other thing we look at is what has gone onto a pallet first. So we're thinking, all right, what do collator's start a pallet with? And unsurprisingly, it is the goods which will form a firm base on a pallet, strong boxes. Yeah. And then we look at what would go on a pallet last, and it is almost the same, but it tends to be sacks, which are slippy, and you don't want to put them on a base because you can't put anything else on those. Toilet tissue, which again, you don't want to put anything else on. So that's another factor that you want to think about. What goes on a pallet first? What goes on a pallet last? Put them near your pallet wrappers, which are here. That's it, guys.
That's great.
I'm curious to see how this pans out, Dom. When you relay this out, I'm waiting for I don't know, in a few months' time, an update to say, yeah, we moved it around. It was 10 times worse. That's what's probably going to happen to start with.
This is one of the things we've said to people: is we will change it. Yeah. Yeah. Because moving the stock about doesn't matter. Moving the racking about, you've got to get that right, because you don't want to go back and redo the racking. So you've got to think carefully about your cut through. But where you move your stock doesn't actually cost you that much. So if we get it wrong, you know what we're going to do? We'll move it again. And we'll move it again till we get it right. So don't be afraid of change. Our collators are quite conservative. They don't want things moving about all the time because they have a mental map of where everything is, and they use that to create an optimum picking path for themselves rather than us calculating an optimum picking path. Having said that, we do generate several different value lists which we will use to sort an order, which itself will suggest a picking path to a collator. So we don't totally leave it up to the collator. We do have ways of manipulating what route the collators will take around the warehouse. But we think that this layout with the move cutout and more equal sections of racking would be a good start for us. So thank you very much for your time.
Aren't you using this also like as I can virtually move things, and then when the next order comes in, map that against what would work better with the new map to kind of prove that, hey, had we moved things physically, this shows you what'll happen, and it's better because.
I wasn't going to, because it's quite a lot of work, but Pete wants to do that, so
yeah, I'm very keen on that.
We'll do it.
I think
Yeah, but I mean, you're just using data on these maps, right?
exactly. So we can move the locations
if
and
you
then
use the
project
same
the orders.
if you use the same principle against the next month or so without actually physically moving anything, you can say, look, had we used the new map, here's the productivity you gain, because you'll just have that data in there for that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely how we should be using this. I agree.
Yeah, okay.
The only thing I'd add to that, Dom, is whether or not you could just model the whole damn thing before you move the warehouse, because I think you could. I think you could work out between each bay, you could go, right, the travel time is the average pick time between, you've got the data, the average pick time between each bay, if it's in the bay next to me is 12 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever, do an average. You've created an idea with the time index of picking an order. You could build an order matrix and go, right, in the current warehouse architecture, if we were to pick it, we can see the travel time as you did, and that's real. That's fair enough. I think you could possibly simulate and say, if we move the stock to this location, you have to physically move the stock in a system. to those new locations and go, now run the same simulation. But if the item's next to it, where the travel time, so it'll go in the same order, but because you're right next to it, I think you could calculate and go, we can see that that's going to be, that order took 3 hours or 4 hours to go around the warehouse and pick. With the new layout, it's going to take 2.5. I think you could possibly simulate that before you actually physically move anything in the warehouse.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, you can throw in some other factors about what if we move the pallet wrappers? What if having, instead of having the start point and end point of the orders at the same place, we move the pallet wrappers around? And then we started to look at redundant forklift journeys. Why is a forklift driving about with nothing on its forks? If we move the pallet wrappers, could the collectors then dump the finished pallet at a different point, which a forklift driver would always look at, pick up the empty pallet, go back to goods in, and take that pallet through to goods in instead of the collector doing it? So, yeah, quite interesting.
And I want to say you cannot do this in Airtable. Any FileMaker.
So it does, listening to you, it does strike me that, so the modeling thing that Gary's just talked about, sometimes, even listening to you, there are some things that you've said that may appear to be wisdom about how if you do this and this and this, hey, this will make it better. But what you have is a tool to which you can feed a lot of different types of orders, one after the other, because clearly that's one of the differences between the type of order. So if you just had one type of customer, then clearly you optimize the warehouse for that. But if you have your own people, you have a retail customer, you have a website sale, you know, whatever those are. So you could pick a day's worth of orders to run as a model, one after each other, saying, here's everything that we did today. How long do we think this is going to have taken? And whether you use like a step count or a time count, number of bays that you've moved between, distance between the bays, total number of things picked, which gives you like a total journey time. If one person was doing this, how long would the whole job take? So clearly 48 hours may be the answer. But if you then do hey, let's move the warehouse around in this specific way and run the whole thing again, that's what gives you the aggregated time difference. So you might make a change and make a difference to 2 orders for one person, or you might make a change and actually make a difference to everybody's orders by a smaller amount. That's the incremental gains methodology. But then it strikes me that data itself needs analyzing. So we made this change. Here's what happened. Here's like the total time that all these 25, 40 orders took. Make this other change, run the simulation again. That would give you the kind of data that is going to help you best. I think because that data itself can be analyzed in terms of, okay, if we make a change, like move all the pallets to the middle or move all of this to zone A or do this, but run a bigger thing than just a single order, which clearly takes time, I get, but you can have a machine that just goes off and runs that because it's all virtual, and see what the big effect of the changes make rather than small changes, small effects on one specific thing. Building up your own. It's almost like here you go, Ian. Here's a pile of data. Could you just go and work out which is the optimal, the optimal change that we can make with as big a data set as you possibly can have the time to manage.
Well, yes,
I do know that Dom's got a huge data set, so that's not a problem. So there's a lot of data there. There's a hell of a lot of data there. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, what you're looking at in the first one was years worth of picking, a year's worth of sales. And I think what we were trying to do was to give other people in the co-op confidence that change would be a positive thing. And given the way we operate, we need to do that. Ara, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well. Sorry, I've been very quiet and blanked out, but I love what you guys are doing, and I thought, you know, very impressive. Two things. I had something similar a while back, whereby we looked at using route planning software for it, because in effect that's what you're doing. Your racking is the route, and the other thing I was looking at was the standard. Your warehouse is you've got your wrapper at the end, right? You got your put away at the end. What if instead of going in a lateral way, you went in a what I call wheel spoke way? So the wrapper's in the middle and the racks span outwards and the directions of travel go outwards. Are you with me, or have I lost you?
I am.
So
no, you're absolutely right. And as I say, moving the location of the pallet wrappers and potentially not having the collator taking the finished pallet up into goods in, but having someone else do that at a later date, because we might think about doing a team collating. So one collator would take a pallet, put all the heavy stuff on it, and then dump that pallet down at one of the bottom ends of the warehouse. Another collator later on would go down what would be, we would create an entire aisle of very light products, hair dyes, all the stuff in all the cosmetic stuff. All the cosmetic stuff. So you've got to get a box. You've got to put lots of little stuff into one box. Break that order down into two parts. All the heavy stuff, one collator does that. That collator dumps that pallet at the bottom of the A aisle. Another collator at a later date comes along, walks down the A aisle, picks all the light stuff off, puts it into a box, puts it on top of the pallet, and they take it up to goods in. Break that one order down into two separate collating actions in order to do what you said. Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking of was there'll be some local colleges where people will be doing either masters or computer simulations and what have you. I bet you could get a couple of takers to take that on as a project for you, so you could do your own thing and get them to look at it completely differently.
Yeah, I mean, again, this was a confidence building exercise. It was the collators are quite conservative. Yeah, they have a very strong mental map of where everything is, and they don't like change. Yeah, so we're trying to persuade them. Here you go. Here are some principles we're working to. We're not just making this up. Yeah, there are some established industry principles that we're working to and concepts that you should think about. Have a look at it like this. Have a look at it another way. Come with us. Because you know
if they
how we
finished
work,
early, no.
A lot of meetings.
If they finish early, are you going to let them go home early? Because you've got to give them a carrot and a stick.
Always.
You can't do that. You've got to give them a carrot and a stick. You can't do it. You know, you've got to give them something. What's in it for me?
Well, the truth of the matter is that on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, on a Wednesday, we collate twice as many lines as we do on a Friday.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a bit of burnout. By the time a collator gets to Thursday, they're pretty knackered. So one of the other things we want to do is to try and change the shape of the week and try and incentivize our customers to accept delivery days that are not Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah. And and again, there's quite a bit more to it than we've shown you. But yeah, it's about giving people the confidence to actually buy into changing the way things are done.
I can see in the future they'll be wearing VR headsets. That'll tell them where to go and what to pick up. Just stick it on. Do you know what? You don't need a piece of paper. You don't need the iPad. Just take this, Waitrose trolley. That's it. Take one of those. Right. Down you go to the left. Pick one of those. Down the right.
That's what I do at the moment. I've got Margot going on in my ear. It's brilliant. Absolutely marvellous. I asked for Google glasses, but I didn't get them, so I've got to do it orally.
Well, yeah,
exciting.
But the text to speech, the text to speech that you'll help us develop again ties into this idea of move things about and not being so tied to everything being in one location, because you can be told where you've got to go, and it's quite a powerful thing.
Cool.
Australian lady.
Yeah,
very good.
Good luck. Looks fantastic. Really impressive.
Very good.
Thank
Good
you.
work, mate.
Great stuff, Tom. Thanks for
Okay,
sharing.
thank you.
Excellent. Anyone? We've got
Brilliant.
-8 minutes, but Beverly, go ahead.
It says it was brilliant. It is brilliant.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Definitely, I was blown away when I saw it, Tom, when you first showed me. Then you told me you'd done it as a joke.
Well, it was. I was just thinking, what's the stupidest thing I could do with FileMaker, and that was it. One record, 1,000 fields, and a couple of scripts. But there's something about it that's caught people's imagination, and that was the point. It was a tool for one meeting and one meeting only. That was its purpose, just to show people at one meeting, to get people to buy in and act as agents of change, to go out to the rest of the carp and say, no, there's something there that's worth exploring. But as it turns out, it has some other uses, and exactly what some of you guys have been saying. We can model change without actually moving things around the warehouse. We've got a way of looking at what would happen if we moved this here, run through historical data, and look at the difference in the timings. And I'm ridiculously pleased with something that's so daft.
Well,
thank you very much.
Thanks.
Nice one, Dom. Super.
Nice one.
We're now, instead of being ahead of schedule, because that was so interesting, we're now slightly behind schedule. But let's go straight into you, Ian, if you're ready.
Yeah, sure. That was really cool. I really liked that. That just it's a really nice evidence-based way of persuading people rather than just telling them, here's what we're going to do. That basically you're persuading them with evidence and able to demonstrate that it's backed by by research and data. So really cool. Okay, really quickly before I get started, could I just get a show of hands for everyone here? Have you tried, everyone who's tried the new semantic search features in FileMaker a little bit, could you sort of raise your hand? I know Bev has.
Tiny bit.
Okay, so we've got like sort of a bit. And then how would anybody say they're quite familiar with semantic search and what it is, or a little bit,
Yeah.
or so mostly sort of a bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bit.
Cool. Right, I will get started. I'll just share my screen then. And I want desktop 2, I think. Okay.
Perfect.
Cool. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the presentation I gave at dotFMP in Berlin. There's a few things I've learned since then, but it's substantially the same talk. A couple of slides I'll kind of skip over because they weren't tremendously helpful, but we'll just kind of move from here. So semantic search in FileMaker, basically, how does it, what we're going to cover is sort of how does it work? Why should we bother? We'll have a look at the new script steps and functions, and then we'll do a deep dive into the FileMaker functions and script steps. So the way I'm going to tackle this is I'm going to start off by showing the simplest possible example, which you can do with only 2 script steps and a couple of fields. So we'll start off with a really, really simple one. And then what we'll do is a deep dive into some of the things that aren't completely obvious. And some of them I was a little bit surprised. So basically, we'll start off with what is semantic search as opposed to what we're used to in FileMaker. Semantic search allows us to search for the meaning and intent in text or an image, whereas the keyword search that we're so familiar with in FileMaker, basically you're going to search for the literal text that you've entered. And to build searches in FileMaker, we're all quite used to constructing searches with multiple criteria. Semantic search gives us a different tool it's not intended to be a replacement for keyword search, and the two of them can work really powerfully together. So it gives us another tool in the toolbox. And what can we do with it? Actually, I should say that Beverly has written a really, really good blog post talking about use cases for it. So I don't have the link handy, but Beverly, if you've got that handy, perhaps you could share it in the chat. That don't mean to hand that off to you, but anyway. So this is Insights from Meetings is a product that I've been working on. What it does is it's an example of a use case that fundamentally what it does is it takes meeting recordings, analyzes them, and then we're using semantic search to find meaning and commonalities across a variety of different meetings. So it can be used for things like research. I started building this when I was working on my dissertation, where I had about a dozen interviews with people, and I wanted to find common threads and themes across these different meetings. And so I built it to do that. So if I go to the simplest example possible, just come here in FileMaker. And what I've got is I've got a database that I've created. I've got 20,000 TripAdvisor hotel reviews. And let's say I want to search for something. Let's say this one. Say if I do a search like that, and what that's done is that's found hotel reviews that match up closely to that text. Likewise, I said was the worst, most. We can do a search and it can find the reviews that have got quite bad ratings. So what I'll do is I'll just run that again, but I'll just do that with script debugger. And you can see the script is actually quite simple. The first line, the set variable JWT, I'm using the FileMaker open source embedding server, and this is the Java web token that does the authentication to it. My next step is that I configure the AI account. I give it an account name, say model provider is custom, and then my endpoint, that's the address of the server, and my API key is this just up here. So we always need to configure an AI account to work with this. And then we say perform semantic find. I'll go into all the details on all the different parameters here, but you can say we're seeing query by natural language. We specify our account name that we've set just here. We specify an embedding model, and then what text do we want to search? We want to search on all records, and what is our target field? And then if we do that, and it comes back, and you'll see that it defaults to giving us 10 records as a result. The other thing it does is that it sorts it in order of the closest is first, the least, the furthest away match is at the bottom. So that gives you a really, really simple example of how that can work. And structurally, we're going to manage database. You can see that we've got a review, which is text. Our rating is a number. We've given it an ID. We've got a global, which is our search term. Global text, just there. Then we've got our embedding. And you'll notice that that's a container field. I'll get into more detail on that later. But it could be either text or container, but you normally want to use container for that. And that is basically all you need to do structurally for the very simple ones. So we come back here and get that out of the way. So now we'll do a bit of a deep dive into what this is. Fundamentally, what we've got here is a three-stage process. We need to do some planning beforehand to decide things like how do we want to use OpenAI? That's the most common. It's the simplest to use OpenAI as our embedding provider. We then have a stage where we need to do the data preparation. And the data preparation essentially is taking our data and we do the embeddings for it. And then our data query is a separate stage. So it's this three-step process. I've reused this chart, but essentially what we've got is we've got our, it says image in FileMaker, but that would be text. We basically pass our text to our embedding model and it returns an embedding to us, a vector embedding, which is a large string of numbers. And then we store that in this case, it's saying vector database, but we can now do that in FileMaker. So FileMaker can now take the place of a separate vector database. And then when we do a search, it's kind of similar. We basically take our text, we get an embedding of our query, and then we query our database. In this case, we use the new FileMaker script step. So I've been talking about embeddings, and the question is sort of, people may be wondering what they are. Essentially, it's a vector representation of some input. And that input would be an object of some sort. In most cases, it's going to be text. So we've got a sentence. We pass this sentence to an embedding model, which is a kind of, it's related, closely related to large language models. And it's going to give us back a large string of numbers, a vector, and the numbers are going to be between 0 and 1. And if we look at word embeddings, so they can be other sentences. In this case, I'll start off with word embeddings because they're the simplest. So if we look at word embeddings, we'd say the closest words to frog would be frogs, toad, Latoria, and so forth, moving further away. So as far as the embedding model is concerned, these items are all quite closely related. And so the cosine similarity that I just mentioned basically measures the similarity of two vectors. So FileMaker's given us a new function to calculate cosine similarity. And if it gives us a value of 1, the two vectors would be identical. 0 means that they've got no relationship to one another at all, so orthogonal, and -1 means they're the opposite. And if we look reducing, in the case of word embeddings, there are normally 300 dimensions. So it would be a string of 300 numbers, 300 floating point numbers. And if we reduce that down to 2 dimensions, you can see that words like niece and aunt and sister are all quite close to one another. Whereas nephew and uncle are further from those, though they're also quite close to one another. And that fundamentally is what the cosine similarity is going to give us, that this can work on a chunk of text as well as just a word. Basically, is this chunk of text, is it close to another chunk of text conceptually? And so we can add and subtract them. I'll just skip over this really quickly, but and that's how we would calculate cosine similarity, but we don't really need to know that because FileMaker's given that to us. So if we look at a chunk of text, in this case, what I've done is I've taken Joris's presentation from dotFMP last year, and this chunk of text, when embedded through OpenAI, gives us a 1,536 dimension vector. So it gives us the number, or rather the vector of numbers that you see on the right-hand side of the screen. So there's 1,536 numbers that we then would compare to other embeddings if we're looking for similar. Images can work the same way. I think a few meetings ago, I did a demonstration of the image search vector. So I won't go into that again, but you can see in this case that image of the dog, when embedded, would give us something looking like what we've got on the right-hand side of the screen, the large string of numbers. So FileMaker has given us some new script steps. They're now under a new artificial intelligence section of the script editor. We've got configure AI account, which is new. Configure machine learning model is not new, so I won't go into any detail on that. I'll just skip over that. Insert embedding and insert embedding in found set. Perform semantic find and set AI call logging are the new script steps relating to semantic search. So we'll start off with the configure AI account. And we've got two variations of this. You can see on line 5 that we've got where it says configure AI account. The account name, I've just given it, we just need to give it an account name, that's some text that we'll use to refer to it later. We've said the model provider is OpenAI. FileMaker knows how to talk to the OpenAI API, and we pass it in our API key for OpenAI. And that's the simplest approach getting started on this. If you're playing around, you'll probably want to start with OpenAI because it's simple and it'll work really, really easily. Now, line 6 has our other option. And this allows us to configure the AI account to use a custom model provider. And the custom model provider can be a different provider that has a different endpoint and a different API key. So in that case, there are several different ways we can do this. FileMaker has given us, with FileMaker Server, if you look in the tools folder on FileMaker Server, you'll see that they've got an open source LLM embedding model that we can run. It does take some configuration, and Wim de Kort at Soliant has done a really good blog post on that. So I'm not going to go into any detail on that because that's probably just going to confuse everyone at this point if we're just getting started with this stuff. So for getting started, OpenAI is definitely.
I have links to both of those in that article.
Okay, super. Thanks very much. So basically, when you configure the AI account, you give it an account name. The account name is scoped to the FileMaker file, and it's cleared when the file is closed. So you actually only need to configure it once, but nothing will work if you don't configure it. And so generally what I found is most of the time when I've been doing a script to do this, I configure the account in the script because it doesn't do any harm to call the configuration multiple times. But that just makes sure that I've not forgotten to do it. For the model provider, if you're using OpenAI, you need to provide an API key. And if you're using a custom provider, it gets a little bit more complicated because you need to specify the endpoint for the API. And this basically, FileMaker is defaulting to run on port 8080. They support the OpenAI API standard, but not exactly. The OpenAI API standard actually specifies an endpoint that ends in /v1/embeddings, but FileMaker is currently supporting an endpoint that goes to /embeddings. So if you're using a custom model provider, you do need to use a little bit of trickery with the URLs to get it working. It can work and it does work, but it's not quite as simple as the OpenAI approach. So the custom endpoint, basically you can choose from a drop down whether you want to use OpenAI or custom endpoint, and the OpenAI, for the custom endpoint is provided is entered in a specify calculation dialog box. To get a custom endpoint, you can basically write your own embedding API in either Python or JavaScript if you're so inclined. That's a fair chunk of work. Claris open source LLM server comes with FileMaker Pro, and you've also got two other options. You've got LM Studio, and Olama actually does not currently work with FileMaker for a couple of reasons that I'll just discuss. So the Claris open source LLM server and LM Studio allow you to run embedding models locally. What that means is that your data does not need to go outside your network to OpenAI, but it does require more in the way of configuration. LM Studio makes this quite simple. Olama currently isn't OpenAI compatible because it doesn't handle multiple embeddings or normalized embeddings, which I'll touch on later. And LM Studio and Olama are the two most common methods people use to run large language and embedding models locally. So LM Studio will work. The open source LLM server will work. Olama probably will work at some point because they're working on implementing the OpenAI API fully, but it's not there yet. One point on LM Studio, Claris product management have been talking to the people at LM Studio to try to make certain that they're kind of coordinated, and that so you're pretty sure that it will be able to work with it in the future. So in this case, this is one of my custom endpoints that I've written, and you can see that basically the FileMaker, the last line, you can see that it was trying to talk to the /embeddings endpoint rather than v1. And the way to deal with this is to basically just revise the way you do the URLs. Right, so yeah, just as I've been saying, that FileMaker support the OpenAI API embeddings. So solutions would be to, if you're building your own, you can implement an embeddings endpoint, or you could set up a proxy in front of the server to point to the correct endpoint. I don't expect, I did say it was going to be a deep dive, but I don't expect as you're getting started that you'll be doing that. Or you could just use OpenAI, which just works. It's really simple. So we've got back to the script steps. Insert embedding works on a single record. And in this case, you can see that we've specified the account name from our configure AI model. We tell it which embedding model we want to use. We specify an input, which in most cases is going to be a text field, and then our target. And our target is the container field we defined for our embedding. We've also got the ability to set embeddings for the entire found set in one go. And that is the insert embedding in found set script step. So that acts on the found set. So you can see again, we need the account name that we configure from the configure AI model. We specify the embedding model, so that's the same. We specify a source field, a target field, and then you can see in the dialog we've got some other parameters as well. They look the same at first glance, but they're not. There are a number of differences. If we look at them a bit more carefully, you can see that the account name specification is the same. We specify an embedding model exactly the same. But the insert embedding, the top one, you can see that it says input as opposed to source field, whereas the second one says source field. So what this means is that the first one, if you insert embedding for a single record, you could use a variable as an input, or you could use a calculation as an input as well as a field. Whereas if you're inserting the embedding in the found set, you can only insert a field. And that initially, when you're just getting started, is a distinction you probably don't need to worry about too much. But later on, when you're trying to improve the quality of the search, you might find that you don't want to embed the entire content of a single field. You might want to embed two fields together, or you may want to embed chunks of a field for a variety of reasons. And the same thing, you'll notice that the first one says target. And while I've specified a field, you could set a variable as opposed to just a field. Whereas the second one, insert embedding in found set, you can only specify a field as the target. Now, you might want to set a variable if you're doing further calculations or doing complex comparisons. Insert embedding in found set also gives you the ability to replace the target contents. So if that's not checked, if there's already an embedding in the field, it won't replace it. And we've got some other parameters as well. I won't go into great detail on the parameters right now, but I'll touch on them a bit further on. So while they superficially look the same, they are different. So the differences are, so account name and model are the same in both. For insert, the source is calculation engine, whereas insert and found set, it's always a field. With insert, the target can be either a field or a variable. And in the case of insert and found set, it's always a field. Insert on a single one does not give us any options on the replace target options, nor does it give us any parameters that we can specify. So insert and found set gives us the option to replace the field contents and the other all options for API operations. So we can actually improve performance by doing that. So storing the embeddings. You can store embeddings in either a container field or as a text field. Fundamentally, as we've said, they're vectors of floating point numbers, very large chunks of numbers, but the API is handing them back to us as text. So we can store them in FileMaker as text, but the developers at Claris have also given us the ability to store in a container field. The reason they've done that, by the way, the choice between the two is you want to store it in container, not as text. The reason is that it's smaller, it's faster, and it won't cause any problems if you accidentally index it. If you've got a giant text string of 1,536 numbers in a text field and you index it accidentally, it's going to cause havoc as your database server tries to index this stuff. So you don't want to do that. So just do it in a container field. If you really do need to store it in a text field, make certain that you 100% switch off the automatically create indexes as needed. That just don't allow that to get indexed. So given I've been talking about these large string of numbers, and the question is, how much space do they take up? And if we look at a chunk of text that's, say, 65 characters long, you'll notice that if you use the OpenAI large model, that it gives you basically the length of the embedding is 38, just under 39,000 characters. That's the embedding for a 65 character chunk of text. So the embedding itself basically is enormous. That's for one record. The OpenAI small model is roughly half the size, about 1,900 characters. And then NXBAI is a different model that I've been using, which is about that. So if you had a database of 100,000 records, and you're using the OpenAI large model, you can count on almost 4 gigabytes of space getting taken up if you store them as text. That's a big chunk of data. If you store in embeddings, store the embeddings in containers, you can see that the space taken up is considerably smaller, but still quite large. So with the OpenAI large model, that it's now down to roughly 25,000 characters. And for 100,000 records, 2.5 gigabytes. So what this means is we can't just go and create vector embeddings for everything in your database. It's going to consume a tremendous quantities of space. If you do store it in a container, you can theoretically store it with external storage, but that's going to adversely impact performance. I've actually not tested it, but the developers did say that theoretically it should work. So the amount of space does mean we need to think about this carefully, how we structure this. And in most cases, what you'll want to do is to store your embeddings in a separate embedding table that is related to your data. Otherwise, every time you load a record, you're going to be loading up this enormous chunk of data as well, which we don't really want to do. And then the other question is cost. Yeah, it's pretty darn cheap. So I had an example where I'd got 42 million tokens, which for the moment, just think of tokens as being roughly equivalent to a word. So to embed 42 million words with OpenAI, if I use the small embedding model, it was 84 cents. The large embedding model is more expensive. You can see it's about 6 times as expensive, so about $5. And then one of their older models, which is now deprecated, was also 5 times the price of the small model. So it's interesting that they seem to have adjusted the prices of their deprecated models to increase them, to discourage use. And what that means is that now the large model and small model at OpenAI are going to be around for quite a while, they've said. But if you're using a model that's not going to be around for a while, searches between different models are not compatible. So if a model became deprecated and was no longer used by OpenAI or your provider, you would need to redo all the embedding of everything. And I spent a fair bit of time looking at embedding performance, and I tested this by generating 1,000 embeddings at a time. And I did this via perform script on server on a local API that I wrote. And I did this by varying the batch size. The batch size is one of the options that FileMaker gives us. And what I found was quite interesting. So the maximum batch size that FileMaker will allow us to do is 500, to do 500 records at a time. If you choose more, the default value is 20. And if you choose more than 500, it just defaults back to 20 and ignores what you entered. But you can see at the left side that if the embeddings chunks or batch size was set to 10, that to do 1,000 records, it took me close to 90 seconds. And if I used the default value, it took just over 50 seconds. But what I found was that if we increased the batch size to about 100, then the time went down quite dramatically, down to less than half. So if you're doing a large quantity of embedding, you can improve the performance over default you can roughly double the performance by adjusting the batch size. And the performance did carry on improving as I increased the batch size up to the limit, but not so much. Once you're past 100, it was pretty close to the same. So the other interesting thing, okay, this is kind of nerdy, but I also found you could improve performance as well, that if you wrote your own API, that if you align the FileMaker batch size to the batch size that is handled internally in PyTorch inside the API, that it improved performance even more. And the reason for that was that you didn't end up with any odd numbers of items that needed to be dealt with. That most of the defaults for the AI models, the batch size is 16. So I found that if I set my FileMaker batch size to a multiple of 16, I got slightly better performance, which I thought was kind of neat in a rather geeky sort of way. But that's why we're here. So anyway, so my conclusions, basically, the default setting for the batch size is too small. If you enter a value over 500, FileMaker will use 20. You get better performance with large batch sizes. And once you're past 100, it's pretty much the same, or pretty close to the same. Okay, back to the script steps again. So the most important script step, perform semantic find. And we've got two options here. We can query by vector data, or we can query by natural language. Query by natural language basically just takes the text as we entered it, and then it'll look after doing a search from that. We need to specify our account name and our embedding model, what text we want to search. We can also specify whether we want to search all records in the database or the found set. So that's actually kind of a nice feature, because what it means is, let's say, for example, if you had I've got a sample database that's a fashion database. And if I knew that I wanted to search for shoes, and I've already got the database categorized by shoes, I can just do a keyword search on the indexed field for the category for shoes, which is going to be super fast, reduce my found set down to only the shoes, and then I could do the semantic search in the found set. So you're able to combine the existing traditional FileMaker search with semantic search to get better performance. Query by vector data is a little bit different, because what you can do is, we've been calling it semantic search, but actually what you can do is, because what it's doing is it's finding things where the vectors are close to one another. So what you could do is, if you've got one record in your database and you've already got a vector embedding for it, you could find other things in your database that are similar to that by taking the vector value for that record, using that as your input into your search with the query by vector option, and then your search will then show you similar items. And if I show you really quickly a little use case for that, I'm not going to show you the full demo, because I basically the search will take a little bit too long. But what I've done here is, on my hotel review database, what you can do is you can import. I've got a script that will import new reviews, and then what it'll do is it'll classify those new reviews by seeing how close are they to already existing reviews that we've got in the system that we know are categorized correctly. So it's not doing a semantic search per se, because we're not actually entering a query to search for text, but it's giving us the ability to find things that are close, things that are similar. So you can see classification 1, I imported 10 reviews, and they're all pretty bad. The classification, and so for things like that, that gives us other options for what we can do. That the other approach to doing this kind of review classification would require building a new AI model to classify the reviews. But the built-in FileMaker function means we don't need to do that, because building an AI model to do this kind of stuff is hard and difficult, and it takes a long time and it's expensive. Whereas we can take advantage of these new features to give us the equivalent. So that's a different sort of use case that we can do. And while that's for hotel reviews, it could be any kind of review of anything that could be imported and classified automatically. So that takes advantage of this function here, that when we do the import, it basically generates a vector embedding for that new item. It then performs a search and says, of the items that are closest, what are their values? What are their review categorizations? And then we just basically grab that and use that as the proposed classification for the review. So that kind of thing could save a fair bit of time compared to somebody sitting down and having to dig through. But it can also flag up things quite quickly that these reviews need to be dealt with. You could do something similar in a bug tracking system. Somebody enters a new bug, basically generate a vector embedding for that, and then look in your system, and it could say, this is similar to this. This looks like this is a duplicate. So there's a number of different applications for this kind of thing. Anyway, when you perform the search, the record set we've just discussed, you can found set versus all records. The return count, you can say how many records do you want to return. The default value is 10. You can specify cosine similarity greater than a certain value. I don't have an example of that, but that'll take a bit of playing around with. Yeah, so in this case, you can see I've said I want to return 20 records as opposed to. The other thing is that the search, when you do this, if your file is hosted, the search will happen on the server. It'll automatically, you don't need to say perform this search on the server. It happens on server automatically. The server will basically return the records in sorted order with the most similar at the top of the list. And what we will be getting in the future is a JSON file that will tell you a list of the record IDs and the similarity values. The one thing I did find is that if you do the search and you do it through a relationship, what happens is the search will no longer happen server side. It will basically download all those vectors to your local computer. And if we come back here, they're big, that you don't want to have, you don't want to have 2.5 gigabytes of data downloaded to your computer before you can do a search, because that's going to be slow. So what you need to do as much as possible is perform the search on the correct context of that vector. So the question is, how fast is the query performance? And again, I did a whole load of testing. I basically have that fashion data set that I mentioned has got about 900,000 records. It took me most of the day to generate embeddings for all those records. So that part of the process is quite slow. To perform the find, pardon me, my test was basically to perform find on the found set. And I started off with a small found set. So, and what I found was that anything less than about 30-odd thousand records took less than a second to perform the search. By the time we got to 75,000 records or so, it was taking a couple of seconds. And 100,000 records would take about, 2.5 seconds to perform. So for comparison purposes, if the same search in a dedicated vector database would be about 10 times as fast. So really, really quick. But still, FileMaker's made this really, really easy to use. And the performance is not too bad. So I carried on doing more testing, sort of with about 500,000 records, the search is taking about 10 seconds to happen. So this kind of illustrates why, if possible, if you're able to combine the keyword search and vector search, that it gives you something that's really powerful. Because if you can narrow that down and make it smaller, then it's going to be a better performance all around. But the nice thing is that it's quite linear. It's basically linear with the number of records up to a point. And that point in my case was about 700,000 records, where search time suddenly went from about 15 seconds to about 27. And apparently what's happened here is that basically it's because my server has only got 16 gigs of RAM. So my server at this point was running out of memory to do this big search. And that's why the performance would slow down there. And I believe that what was happening here was that it was starting to swap memory for disk space. And that's why we got the big slowdown. Now, the other thing is that this was a fairly large embedding model. This was 1024 dimensions. The number of dimensions has an effect on search performance. So if I used a smaller model, then the search would be quicker. So what was this? Just yeah. So with a smaller number of dimensions, in this case, this is 512 dimensions. You can see the search is faster, but we still run into the same type of thing a little bit further up. But you can see that it's because the server is memory limited. So my conclusions here, basically search is faster with a smaller number of dimensions, but this might be at the expense of search quality. And at the point where the search slows down, 700,000 was like a big leap in time. But I think most people are probably going to be searching on much smaller numbers than that. We've also got a number of new functions as well to go with the script steps. So we've got a compute model is not a new one. That's been around for a while. A cosine similarity allows us to find the similarity between two vectors. Get embedding will, after you've configured the account, will return the embedding value for a chunk of text against the model. Getting embedding as file allows you to take a text embedding and convert it to file. Get embedding as text the other way around. Get model attributes is an older one. Get table DDL, I won't go into now. Get token count tells you how many tokens you've got in a chunk of text. You might want to know how many tokens you've got in a chunk of text because that has cost implications. And as I've said, tokens are kind of equivalent to words, but not exactly. So if we look at a few examples here, you can see that the word week and weekend, week is 1 token, weekend is 2, New York is 2 tokens, wouldn't is 3 tokens, antivirus is 3 tokens, am Abend in German is 3, and that's, I believe, on the weekend, I think. And then rock and roll is 4 tokens. So there's not a one-to-one mapping between word count and token count. But most models are priced by the token, or rather by the million tokens. Cosine similarity, basically what we can do is pass in 2 embeddings, and it'll give us a value between -1 and 1. It's really, really important that when you're comparing embeddings, they have to be the same model, and they have to be the same number of dimensions. And it's for this to work reliably, the data type of the fields should be the same. Because FileMaker supports both text and container values for embedding, you'll want to convert one to the other to make sure that they're the same when you do the comparison. And you also want it to be a normalized vector. So this comes into play if you're using OpenAI for your models. They are normalized vectors. You don't need to worry about it. I'll confess I didn't fully understand this, and I don't fully understand this, but it's quite important that essentially just know that you need to use a normalized vector. And what that'll do is that'll scale the vectors so they've got a length of 1. It makes things much easier to calculate. And if you don't do this, FileMaker won't calculate the cosine similarity correctly. What's interesting is all the search will still work perfectly, but the cosine similarity calculations won't be right. And yes, I did ask Perplexity AI about what that the normal stuff was. Get embedding as file. A lot of the stuff FileMaker's done here is basically provide a simpler method of doing what we could do before by interacting with an API. And the APIs return the values as text. And this function, get embedding as file, allows us to convert that into a container. And you can see that that it gives it we've got a result, a file name. The .fve is for FileMaker vector embedding. And we can go the other way around. And the reason you might want to do this is that if you needed to interact with an API, so you can convert a FileMaker vector embedding into the text vector embedding. So back to insert embeddings. The question is which embedding model you want to use. And I'm going to suggest if you're just getting started with this and just playing around, just go with OpenAI to start with, because it's going to be the simplest. Their stuff's going to work. FileMaker's built things to work with their API, and it works. It's really, really simple that way. If you want to get more involved, then there's a website called huggingface.co, and Hugging Face is basically it's a repository for machine learning models, large language models, and embedding models. And you'll find there are literally thousands of different models available on this site. Not all of them will work because not all of them are normalized. But what you'll find is that many people have built specific models for different purposes. And in a lot of cases, a model that's been designed specifically for a very narrow use case is going to work better than a large general model. But getting into how do you choose a model is it's a giant can of worms, and it's kind of a session in its own. Then you'll also possibly hear about chunking strategies. What chunking strategies are is basically the question of how much text and what text do we want to pass in to your embedding model to generate at one time. There are several different strategies. Basically, there's fixed size, where you basically say, I'm going to always pass in 50 words or 100 words of text at a time. A sentence strategy, where you always embed things on the end of sentences, which is probably quite good. Structural, if you've got data that's been from a website, you can actually determine what the headings are, and you can categorize it and group it that way. And you might take say everything under one heading and embed that as one chunk, go to the next heading and embed that as a separate. A sliding window strategy basically will be that, a sliding window over a chunk of text. And then semantic chunking involves it gets fairly complex, but essentially what you would do would be to generate embeddings for each sentence, compare each sentence to the last one. Basically, you'd group the sentences together and and then chunk those together until such time as you reach sort of a certain point where they differed semantically from the others. So that is something you don't need to worry about initially, but later on, when you're trying to optimize and improve performance, that's something you will run into, but can be ignored for the moment. So questions, the implications on servers, speed of embedding, different dimensions of performance. Again, I've done some testing on different servers, and basically Mac servers have got a GPU, and they're pretty effective at using that GPU to generate embeddings quickly. The other option is to have a server that has an NVIDIA GPU, and most FileMaker, which will give you the fastest embeddings. I did testing on a variety of different NVIDIA GPUs all the way up to an A100, and that was shockingly fast. But NVIDIA A100s are also really expensive. They're like $20,000 to $30,000, and if you want to basically rent one, they're going to cost you $5 to $10 an hour to use. So cost comes into this. They're really, really fast, but they're tremendously expensive. And again, I'm willing to bet that nobody's FileMaker server has an NVIDIA GPU on it, though people running Macs will have, if it's an M series, then it'll have the built-in GPU. And to be honest, I think those seem to be pretty effective. When you're doing the bulk embedding, that's when the performance matters the most, really. I'm still trying to work this out into a blog post and get my head around it all. But there's a number of other things that I found. One of them was that when I was doing my embedding locally on my API here, that it wasn't that much slower than running it off the NVIDIA A100, which was remote, and that was down to network latency. It was about a third slower, although the other one could generate embeddings 20 times as fast. But the network latency became a big thing. The other thing is disk performance is something we need to think about, because these are big, big files. That if we're generating a large volume of big files, then disk performance comes into it. So I don't know yet all of the implications on server, but it's there are going to be some. So kind of my final thoughts. Different embedding models produce different results, but they do need to be consistent. Your searches, you have to use, for your searches, you have to basically be consistent, and your search text needs to be embedded using the same model that you've been using throughout. You can't search across different embeddings or embedding lengths, and where possible, use normalized embedding models. And again, if you're just getting started trying it out, use OpenAI. Don't send them any sensitive data, but the cost is going to be minimal. You'll be able to do a lot of experimenting, and it'll cost you pennies, if that. So that basically is it. So thanks very much for listening. Does anyone have any questions?
You mentioned a little bit earlier on about storing the embeddings when they're a container in a separate table.
Yeah.
Is there actually a performance increase to that? Because my understanding is that with the container data, when the record is sent backwards and forwards, if you're not referencing that container data, then it doesn't get transferred with the record data itself. Is that something you've seen or noticed in the performance?
Yeah. That's one of the reasons for doing that. The other reason is that in some systems you may actually use different embedding models for different purposes. So most of us on the ETS, what we've been doing is using a separate table to store them, storing the embedding, which model we're using against each one. So if we need to search, what we can do is we can first find the embeddings for that model, then do a search on the found set on that, and that will avoid that problem. But yeah, sort of the thing you said about sort of shipping down the container data, or not shipping the container data with the, is one of the reasons for that, is that if we've got an enormous table, I mean, you can imagine if you load a layout in table view and you're bringing all that record data down, you don't want to be bringing down
a text embedding at all. Yeah.
No.
Because that will have if it's in a text field, it would have to come with the record every.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's still kind of early days for finding out everything about exactly how this is all going to work with FileMaker, but sort of a few of us have been working with this for a while, and that's kind of what we found out so far.
Cool, excellent.
I want to add that we sort of figured out too that a container implies to a lot of people that you've got a large document with images or Word or Excel or PDF or whatever, but it's text, and when it's text, it's numbers, but it's basically text stored in a container. It doesn't have any of the metadata that you would normally have with a file that's a PDF or an image or things like that. So it really, and you saw this comparison of size, but if you were to compare an image versus this embedded text, you'd see that text in a container makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The other thing that it does performance-wise is that if it's stored in a text field, the programming involved in converting a large chunk of text into the individual, the vector, text processing is quite slow. So they're able to do some optimizations behind the scenes to make that a bit quicker.
Yeah, and presumably the reason it's smaller is to do with the encode. Is it to do with the encoding of the file is somehow different from just a whatever UTF-8 or whatever the standard text field would be?
Probably. That's a good question. Maybe I'll ask them.
So, Ian,
Yeah.
How do you know what the difference between the embedding models are related to the kind of data that you have? So clearly you'd go something that's small versus something that's large in the word implies something, but you've gone, oh, I've got this other thing that I'm MX by, which I'm choosing to use. How do you get to a point where you understand how the models that are available relate to the data that you have? Other than by trial and error.
Yeah, there's a certain amount. There is going to be a certain amount of trial and error, but in some cases, there will be models that have been built for specific purposes. So let's say, for example, if you were dealing with financial data, you might try to, use the models that Bloomberg have provided, though they're not open source and you would have to pay for them. But you can be pretty darn sure that a Bloomberg embedding model is going to give you better results for financial type things than a general purpose model from OpenAI.
I'm just thinking, so the example you showed of a load of reviews, so they're either going to be made up, the review is either going to be made up of lots of short phrases, or a long rambling ranting sentence versus something that you might construct if you were let's go creating it. Let's use the opposite company handbook. So you're going to create sentences that have content, but the content has meaning. There's efficiency of words,
Yeah.
but they're long, like properly constructed sentences, as opposed to like a rambling thing.
Yes.
And so the content is, it's the same thing. It's 100 words, but the nature of the content has a great deal of difference in terms of, so something which is a technical document, you'd expect the reading age to be a lot higher. You'd
Yes.
expect lots of three syllable words. Somebody who's just ranting about a hotel room or the state of the football will not be paying a lot of attention to that.
Yeah.
A high collection of shorter words, for example. That's where I was going really, just in terms of, because to get started, what seems to be one of the messages is a lot of, well, you just have to experiment with this, experiment with this. The question is, how does the combined knowledge of the people like you who've been properly experimenting feed through into things that the rest of us can kind of shortcut, is I suppose what I'm asking.
In terms of choosing models, I'm afraid I don't have a really good answer for that one. That my suggestion would be I mean, the OpenAI models are pretty good. And yeah, trying to find different models and decide which one is like, once you start going down that route, you end up looking at Hugging Face and basically saying you will see literally 5,000 things that look so close to one another, is that from my understanding, like, well, these look identical, but they're not. But I don't know where the differences are. So I don't have a good answer for that, I'm afraid.
I think the general, because the general OpenAI models and stuff are trained on publicly available content, everything on the internet and Wikipedia and all on our journal articles and all that type of stuff, and are probably good for most typed language on the internet. So they're very, very broad. Obviously, when we're searching against our databases, we're often not looking for long form text. In some instances, we might be, and I guess in some ways, having trained your own model on some data, or as you say, a restricted model that actually it's only about product codes or it's only about descriptions of location, would allow you to end up with a smaller number of words in your embedding, because you're not having to compare it to what are the closest 500 words to this initial word and compare each of those kind of matrices. Whereas I was thinking about the warehouse layout, where
Dad, where's Levi?
I don't know, Mister. I'm just talking at the moment. Sorry, one of my kids interrupted there. But I was thinking about the route mapping between different locations in a warehouse. Because that's almost the sort of data that a language model is, where you're saying between each of these two items, what is that minimum distance? And by doing a vector-based distance between this, whether it's a physical difference or it's a difference in number of words, effectively it's the same idea, where you're looking at how close are these things to each other, and then given these 10 items, which items are closer to it. I could see that conceivably, if you were able to train a model to do that, if you fed in that information, you would then be able to get a number of those matrix differences to each of those endpoints of where you might have something that's closer or more further away from something.
Yeah. Bev, I see you got.
Yeah. On huggingface.co, they do have a text search. So it might be something going there and saying, here's kind of what I'm looking for. Which one do you think would be more probable for me to test out for real estate or for manufacturing, concrete buildings, or what I mean?
Yeah.
Just kind of do your search on that site. When you pull down the search thing, it'll say full text. Click on the full text, prompt away, see what it says.
Yeah, certainly I know there's there are legal ones that are aimed at the legal market as well.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. It's yeah, it's a really good question, John. Sorry, I don't know like a good answer for you.
No, I did, but it wasn't either. It was designed for you to tell us the answer or to make the discussion happen, because
Yeah.
this is the stuff that, you know, to be able to say, oh, this is about what do we need to learn, where do we need to go to learn it, you know, are there any things that can, when we're busy people, we don't have loads of spare time to just speculatively do something, or it's something we can't just charge a customer for because it's us working out the best route, you know. And
Yeah,
it's not to be lazy, but it is to just like boost the speed of travel.
certainly. Yeah. Okay, I guess I'll hand back to Jul then.
Great. Well, thanks, Ian.
Brilliant. Thank you.
That was fascinating. I mean, I'm sure Ian will hang around for a little bit if we want to carry on in the virtual bar afterwards, unless you're dashing off, Ian.
No.
But that's a really fascinating topic and really interesting stuff, and it's really good to see what's going on there. So another excellent talk. Thank you, and thanks to everyone for their interesting input into it as well in the comments. It's great. I had a quick question that came up. I don't know if the person wants to ask the question themselves or you want me to do it. Oh, you're on mute, Dom.
Away you go, Jul.
Away I go. Okay. Dom asked me about he runs a routine every night, I think it is, that requires certain volumes to be mounted that are not mounted by default, or may not be mounted by default. So he needs to be sure that they're mounted. So he and I think it's generally an interesting question that people like to know the answer to. Wants to know what the best way of ensuring that those volumes are mounted is, because I know he's had trouble with including it within an Apple script, for example, which is what he was doing at one stage. So generally, what do people do to ensure that external volumes are mounted when you need them before you run a script or during the running of a script?
Do you want me to give it a bit more context?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So running a script on a client machine using Apple script, no problem. Mounting volumes, no problem at all. But I want to run a script sequence on the server because I want to export files to a website. Now, to do that, I need to get those exported files into a shared volume on the network. Now, me being a belt and braces kind of guy, I want to check for the check that those volumes are mounted on the server if I'm going to do that. And if they're not mounted, I want to mount those volumes. I can write an Apple script that will mount those volumes if I run the Apple script outside of that script sequence. As soon as I run that Apple script as part of the script sequence, there seems to be a privilege error that occurs. So two solutions I've come up with. One is to trigger a folder action script by writing a file to the documents folder on the server, which then causes a second Apple script to run, which would then mount the volumes that I want. That worked fine on a Mac Studio, doesn't work on the Mac Pro, which is our primary server. So the second solution I had was to create an alias for the volumes that I want mounted and to effectively open that alias. I think that works with the Apple script running as part of the script sequence, because I create the alias, I open it up, I store the credentials in the keychain, and then the Apple script doesn't have to access the credentials, so I don't have a privilege error there. Any ideas?
Yeah, Gary's got an idea.
Yeah,
Well, you go, Gary.
it's basically what we do on our bots. So let me just share my screen. So okay, so we do a similar thing. So the script step. So for example, when we're doing stuff in here, so if we have an open script step, we go through our processes checking whenever we open the bot process up. But one of them is mount drives. So we just tell the application, open a desktop path, and we've got a folder on our desktop. If I hide all this, called mount. And in here are the aliases to the folders, the location. So you can see here on this bot here, these 3 volumes are mounted, okay? If I eject those volumes, it's going to tell me it's active. Terminal is running something. Never kill that. Then I would then go, let me just run this here. Typically my headphones are running out when I'm on a call, so hold on. Can you still hear me?
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. So if I was to now close this process, let's quit this for a second, and then I'll just relaunch it. You'll see as part of that launch process, it will go through a load of scripts, it checks a load of stuff, and it will mount the volume. We've always done it with a keychain. We've been doing this for years, and an alias. And that process, if I go through this process, it will go through, load some scripts, and then it will just say it's done, and then it will stop. Right. If I now hide this, you'll notice those volumes are all back again, because that script is literally opening those aliases. For us, that seems to be the most reliable way. If you do this on a Mac, I mean, you're on a Mac, Dom, so that's fine. Yeah. That's great. You should be able to do this on server. It won't make a blind bit of difference whether it's server client. It doesn't really matter. The other advantage you've got, if that poses a problem, you can tell. I don't know where. Hold on, let me just look at what we're doing for the command for the Apple script. So we are telling it to just tell the application finder, open the path to the desktop of the text, and then basically open it. We've done it this way for a while as a native script, and it works well. The alternative that sometimes we had an odd problem is you tell terminal to go open that, but it'll open terminal as a constant session on your machine. So, but I'd give that a go, and that should work. The other thing is when you're writing files to somewhere, if I can find a database that does it, hold on. Give me a sec. So we do another one here. So we run a shell script. That's what I was trying to look for. So just to double check it, we'll do a shell script to open that folder in the shell script as terminal. So it's at the start of the script before I run the export. So we're double checking to run that again. It doesn't matter how many times you run this thing. And then we just wait 10 seconds for it to mount. And then we come back to FileMaker and then continue the script. That works really well. And then if for some reason it doesn't write to it, FileMaker will give you an error code. I think it's error code 800, can't write to volume. I may be wrong.
No, you are right.
Right. So if you get that error code at 800, you can capture that in your response and then tell it to go off and run that and loop through. And then you can count your loop and you could try it for 4 attempts, 5 attempts. If it still fails 5 attempts in a row, it can fire an email to you to tell me it hasn't done it.
Okay, but just to be clear here, what I'm trying to run is a scheduled script on the server. Now, you can just run a scheduled script, or you can run a script sequence, which is an operating level script, followed by a FileMaker script, followed by an operating level script. Now, I can write an Apple script that will mount the volumes, and I can run that Apple script on the server. It will mount the volumes, no problem. When I run that Apple script as the first script sequence of the operating level script, for some reason, unless I'm using the alias route, it won't mount that volume. There seems to be a privilege error that occurs when that Apple script is run as the first one of those script sequences, the first operating level script in that
Right.
script.
Yeah. That what will happen is you've got a third-party tool trying to run a script on your machine. So you need to set the privileges up on, I can't remember where it is on it. Hold on. It's one of these that will say, oh, this is an old bot. So I've got a new one on one of the other ones, but there'll be something in here about, I can't remember where it is.
Under full disk access.
It's file or full disk access, one of them, yeah. It's basically FileMaker Pro can then have full disk access. You need to make sure that's on. And files and folders. Yeah, I think it's just full disk. And you've got, so here we've given terminal the access rights to the desktop folder. So you have to give it the privilege.
Yeah.
If the OS hasn't got the privilege, because it's a third-party app trying to fire something. So you will get possibly a privilege. The way around that potentially is if you run it as a native, not an Apple script, as a native, it's a native script. I think FileMaker does the handoff for you because it has access. Providing FileMaker's got full disk access, it'll be okay.
Well, I shall give that a go.
One of the suggestions, I know Christian's not here, but he would say MBS plugin. You can
Yes,
you can do MBS.
$400 for a server license.
Yeah, but you can do the MBS.mount, and there's a few other commands.
We use Monkey Bread software. We absolutely do. It's not a problem. But the other issue I found is that using Apple Script to mount the volume as a script sequence in the way that you're talking about meant that I had to include the username and password as part of that script, whereas using an alias means I don't.
Yeah, in some respects, because, well, you don't have to use the username and password. If you mount a volume and save it in your keychain, it'll still work.
Exactly, yeah, which is why I'm using the alias route, because that
You don't have to do the alias route. You could open... Just trying to think that through. If you go connect to a server and it's in keychain, you connect the same volume SMB mount, it'll know what it is and it'll do the association. I've always used the alias anyhow, so I'd try the alias route and stick with that. We don't have any problems. I can reboot all our bots. Our bots auto reboot. So when the cache gets too big on the FileMaker stuff and bits and pieces slow down, we regularly reboot them. So the system's auto regenerating, and we honestly never have a mount problem at all.
No, I'm happy with the alias route. I think that works better for me. It is a belt and braces thing. You know, I'm just wanting to make sure I check. You know, I check for the existence of certain files, and I just want to make sure that if they're not there, I try to open or I try to mount that volume. So, yeah.
And another alternative solution would be a way to move away from mounting files and folders directly and to basically write an API where you perform a request against the API to send the files to that. So obviously, if you, in an instance where you have a physical server on site and it's writing it to another network drive on site, that works fine. But in certain instances where that's writing it out to, you know, AWS or some other cloud provider, or actually having the scripts call an API request with that writing out whatever they need to, which then will then take it off and kind of do it. That kind of infrastructure allows you to separate out the mounting and unmounting of drives on the server, putting that behind like a microservice or an API or something like that to pass that, and then you can have that then do whatever you want to do. Obviously, that's a bit more work to go that way compared to what you're running at the moment.
So the other thing is, where are you trying to send this? You're sending this to a web server, are you?
Yeah, no, what's happening is that we are changing our website over. I have to send 2 sets of data files up, one to the test website, one to the live website. The source of the data files needs to be the same, but the formatting of the files needs to be different. So we've got a third-party bit of software that will send those files up to the websites. I just need to dump those files into a folder, and then we run a VM Windows machine that has this third-party software set on it that checks those folders and sends those files up to the test or the live website, depending on which folder I've sent the files to. So previously, I was using a client machine that was having those scripts on FileMaker run, and they were called via an event on the calendar. So I wrote an Apple script, saved it as an app, called it as an event on the calendar, and that worked fine for the live website. But for the test website, I need to do it slightly differently.
Right.
Which is why I've gone to the server route. It's a bit more reliable.
Yeah, I'm thinking with what Gabriel said is the fact that if you've got where you're sending it, if it's a web server, it's got an API, and you can push files via an API, go that way. If it's like SFTP and you can then upload it to a location on the web server, you've got Monkey Bread to help you do that transfer. And that's where I was thinking, because you can then do the report, save it to the desktop, put it in a container field, get FileMaker to do the work and send it. So yeah, there's various options.
Yeah, one of the ways it's a good way to think about designing infrastructure is to put something like AWS Lambda in the middle, which basically means that rather than trying to write something from one server directly to another server, which may or may not, maybe doing an update, maybe doing a software update, to write those into a queue, which you can have then something to then be able to then write that out to. So if the website has gone down for whatever reason, you've still kind of created that queue. You've taken that job off your main server, you've pushed it onto something else, and then that can sit there, and then when that server responds to say, yes, I can handle your request, now you know you can do it, and you can, do it like that. We found doing things that way means that rather than having things that have to talk to each other all at the same time, you've kind of got that point of view where if any one of those bits, and the more stages you have in the system, the more likely it is that one of those things doesn't respond for whatever reason, but it doesn't mean that then it doesn't get passed on to the next service that requires it to do something.
Well, that comes down to the heart of the problem is we want to move away from our current setup to using a VM running on a NAS. That VM runs the bit of software that the website provider has given us to transfer files. So, so long as we can access that shared folder that bit of third-party software needs to have on the FileMaker server, I can get rid of 3 other machines and make the whole chain a little bit more secure. As I say, it's a belt and braces job. Before I start generating the export files to the website, I want to make sure those volumes are mounted on the desktop. And I have found a solution, which is Gary has suggested, is using aliases and using Apple scripts to open those aliases. I was just looking for other solutions, seeing if there was any other thoughts out there.
I think we've covered most of them, Dom. I don't think there's anything else. It's not.
No,
moving files around shouldn't be that complicated.
It isn't, but if you're running it on FileMaker server, you're restricted to accessing the documents folder and the temporary folder.
But that's
so
fine.
You have to have an operating level script to move files about after you've generated them, is what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is one of the that is a valid point. That is one of the reasons why we've got a bot system. So I've got 5 Mac Minis which do all this sort of heavy lifting because I've then got the full power of client.
Yeah.
For that reason, I've come across this problem a long time ago and thought I don't like it, so I'm going to get around it. So put a bot in and that's fine. Mac Mini's 400 quid. You could argue the fact that Monkey Bread server is always 400 quid, so you've got various options that cost the same money. So.
Well, no, I'm happy enough with what I've done for now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just monitor it and try and get it to alert you a bit more if it can when it goes wrong, I think, and then try and find out what the problem is. The other thing as well is I've noticed on our servers, we regularly reboot our servers anyhow, so I've noticed Apple scripts and bits and pieces go wrong. We've got a couple of things that do run on servers. You don't reboot the servers regularly; they go wrong sometimes. So
once a week, following your advice, Gary.
Good, thank you.
Right.
I had one quick question to. Has that answered your question, Dom? I'm giving you enough.
Thank you very much. It has. Thank you.
Good, fine. Okay, superb. I just wanted to show a graphic, and one of the reasons why we use monitoring tools to monitor our servers and bits and pieces. I just wanted to share this, and this was a curveball that Jul doesn't really have on the agenda, but I wanted to share this. So this is a graph of one of our servers, and this is disk space. The red one at the bottom is what I'm highlighting. I hope you can see that. So you can see every week we lose around about 5 gig off of our server, and then it comes back straight away. So I'm throwing it out there, and we know what this is. We've found out what this is, but it's just the point of, if you've got systems out there, I've said this all along, if you've not got monitoring on your servers, this thing will be blind to you. You would never notice it. So, and to explain what this is we run a process where we build a local FileMaker file for one of my MDs who wants to basically, when they're on the plane or whatever, they can then have the full system on their machine. They don't need to connect to the server. So we created a local copy of it. But the problem is we've got a lot of data. So this local file copy, what it is about a 5 gig FileMaker file that's got all the history of sales and bits and pieces in it. So therefore they dump that on their iPad, and wherever they go for their week's travel, they've got the last week's worth of data live to them. They don't have to call anywhere. They can be off grid in the middle of the forest and working fine. No problems. But we were looking at this and we just noticed this, and the only reason why we noticed it is for one day we got alerts saying our hard drive had reached the limit of, we didn't have enough free space. Well, we have free space, but it was hitting a critical limit and we wanted to see. But I didn't realize this, is we moved that into a container so we knew the last backup. So, and I've been using FileMaker for years, and it sort of dawned on me that I knew this would happen, but I didn't realize it was that extreme. What this does is at 1 in the morning, and this is why we were getting the alerts, because it was getting close to being 10% available. So we got an alert saying we got 10% free space in the main volume. 1 in the morning, it does all this work, builds this file. It takes about half an hour to write this massive file. It's a local file. And at the end of the process, it put it in a container field. Soon as it put it in the container field, we lost 5 gig off the server, hence this drop. Yeah. And then what happens is, the reason why you get the 5 gig drop, it's replacing a file that was already there in the container field. It's a single record database, and it's just going update the container with a new file. What it does is it doesn't replace it. It won't replace it. The only time the server ever reclaims that space back, we found, is that reclaim of space going back up is when the backup runs. So for those of you that have a long period of time and you got loads of storage space, it doesn't really matter, but it's just a food for thought. And I didn't know if anyone out there had a way of, well, there's 2 ways to get this. You either run a backup or you close the file and it'll compact it and it'll reclaim the space. Is there any tool or anything that anyone's got out there that I could run that after I've replaced that container, I could run a process to reclaim the size back straight away? I think you're always going to lose it for the period when you write it. So I was thinking I could have a script that could delete the old container that was in there, reclaim the space, put the new one. I don't lose any disk space. Just an idea. I don't know if there's anything out there.
Is this what operating system is the server running on? Is that running on a Mac?
No, the server's on Windows.
The server's running on Windows, because it seems like it's like a garbage collection thing of the way FileMaker is writing the file to it, and then Windows is kind of going, oh well, right, this file's not needed anymore. It doesn't until it doesn't close the file, it doesn't resolve all of those things. So other than having a scripted close and open of the file,
which ironically this file's a bit non-volatile, where it's a single build file. We could do that and we could script it to tell the server close the file, bring it back. But it raised a small alarm bell with me, Penny and Ben, just going, right, okay, of all the solutions we've got out there, with all the containers we've got out there, this will be a problem. Like, for example, Diamond Comics will give us their new imagery for all their new comics for this month, and we'll just drop all of the high-res comics into containers. That could be 2,500 in there. And we might be replacing ones that were there before because they've done, I don't know, new versions of the comic covers. And they issue the same name. So we just have a script that goes through and does it. Well, all of those will lose disk space until the disk then purges and does a backup. So it's just, I don't know. I saw it and just thought, wow, it was a bigger problem than I thought it was, because we got an alert and we ran out of disk space. So
that's why Zabbix is the way forward.
Oh, absolutely. We live and breathe in that platform, I tell you. And if you haven't got that running on your servers, please install it. You have to have it. It's the only way to have any idea of what your server's doing. But yeah, I didn't show the graph before, which was over the long period of time, but this, I'll just quickly share it again. So this shows you the idea of production of what happens over a long period of time on a server that's quite started. Let's go 6 months history of disk space, and you just see the ever declining. Look what happens. So on one of ours, March, we realized the decline and then went, okay, we're going to address this. I couldn't address it. We just run out of so much space. I just added space. We got space in the stack, so we can just add more disk space to it. But it shows you an active database that's running. You leave it running for 6 months, you realize what happens to your storage. We just lost 10 gig on our server. That's production environment. And we can't lose that. This is not going to change. We need that data. It's only growing. So it is.
Yeah, I find doing a regular migration. We have a solutions bundle, so we do monthly software updates. And actually, when you do a migration, use the data migration tool into a file. Obviously, FileMaker recompacts those records, which actually gives you a fairly significant performance increase because it takes all of those records which are written here, there, and everywhere until you close or you do a save as compacted or you do a data migration. It doesn't go through and put those all back into where records being in the same leafs of the actual data that's written. It is one of those things, FileMaker, you kind of have to on some regular basis, if it's a high traffic file which is generating a large number of records or reading and writing new data into there. I've not come across any way other than doing a save as compacted or doing a migration of a new version into the file where that will happen and it'll go through and kind of do that.
We haven't gone to that level. We just regularly close the file. That seems to work.
Give it a go. Save as compacted. It makes such a difference.
Yeah, we'll have to have a look at it. But it does. When you see the tools and you've got the tools monitoring this stuff, it gives you an insight to what your server's doing.
And you can see that remote. If you look at your remote call wait time, you'll see that over time. If the server hasn't been restarted or that file hasn't compacted, that over a standard usage will just creep up over time. You'll kind of see that as those files grow. And I don't know. There's not a good way of having on some regular basis closing the database, save as compacted, reopening that file. Obviously, you can script all of those things, or you could do it with a worker bot or something like that. But it's certainly in high traffic environments. It's something you kind of
and that's it. I think that's the thing. We have a downtime of about 4 hours in the middle of the morning, so it's literally that time. My solution is going to be when I upgrade the server. I'll wait that long. Every 3 years we'll sort the file out. It'll be fine. But I wanted to share that with everyone because it was a highlight to us, and we just saw that regular blip and going, well, what the hell is that? And it's just that it was just one container. That was it. So
hey, let me jump in here. I'm from New York, and part of my responsibility is to bring controversy to user group meetings around the world. So with that preface, I will say I've seen over the years, and unless I misread what I read, some lively conversations about the different scenarios where you might want to compact or you might not want to compact. There was a good, I think it's sort of the authoritative white paper on how the FileMaker block structure is set up, the 4K blocks, how they're linked, and so forth and so on, written by, I believe, Wim DeCord and Stephen Blackwell. So I read that a couple times, spoke with Richard Carlton about it. So here's my understanding, and I could be 100% wrong or 90% wrong, is we don't compact databases as a matter of course. FileMaker seems to have some built-in methodologies for reclaiming unused space. To what Gary's point that it triggers on a backup, I'd heard it was triggering on idle time. I've seen it happen where I've deleted a lot of data off a file, taking it down gigabytes or terabytes or whatever, probably gigabytes. And I have seen it through no effort of my own decrease in size over time. So I put that out there as and I'm going to go try and look through some of the old emails as an opportunity for people to do less work and spend more time in recreation. That said, I have heard that for certain tables that are of a static nature, they do well compacted. I've heard that active tables perform well when there's blocks with spaces across, sort of scattered spaces that sort of optimizes in some way. That said, I'll just close it and say, I don't know.
Tony, the one thing I will say is on that reclaiming one, if the idle time is over 24 hours, you may be right. But if it's that file was in operation for literally 20 minutes to 25 minutes to create a file, and then it just sat on the server, and it sat there for nearly 22 hours until the backup kicked in on that file, and then it reclaimed. So
Interesting.
idle time, maybe, but maybe FileMaker's idle time is a week. So, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I guess I've seen it either way.
Yeah.
And I like to maintain a lot of uncertainty in any opinion that I have. No, because because I've been wrong at least once in my life.
We've all been wrong many times.
Begging you to admit it.
Maybe twice.
I think.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah. I was going to say there was a period when we had to purge the cache regularly. You remember that era?
Still do. I got script on our box. I still do it. I still do it.
It does make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, we throw out CACHE from time to time.
Yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to.
There's a thing with when the backup runs where it does like a rolling hold of the file, where it kind of does that kind of pause on it, which kind of forces server to kind of almost commit everything that's in memory like into the disk. You think it's in there anyway, but there's definitely something that happens in that backup where it sort of does a roll through the file, make sure nothing's happening, cleans it itself afterwards, as it then does like a hard snapshot to then kind of take the backup from it, doesn't it? There's definitely something kind of that happens in that sort of loosey-goosey moment where it sort of rolls through the backup. Got to have at least one good view on this file, start to finish. Right, there we go.
I think one thing we can all agree on is that the IT people should give our FileMaker systems ample space on the VM stack.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of it. It's the nice thing of being in VM. If you're in that, you can just have more space. If you're on, you've got enough. But the guy who runs my VM, he just keeps coming back to me going, how much more data do you need?
How much less business do you want to do?
Well, there is that. We have that debate regularly.
I think it's probably time to move to the virtual bar, isn't it?
I think we can. I will stop the recording and we'll move over. On for the next one as well, I will try and get the chat so you can all download it live. So apologies for that. I need to work out what the hell I'm doing wrong. So I'll try and sort that out. So.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks ever so much. Lovely session.
Okay.
See you all
I
again.
want to say thank you to everyone who came and everyone who contributed, everyone who talked, great presentations throughout, and everyone who merely listened. I don't think there were many people who merely listened tonight, which was quite an achievement. So fantastic, everyone. Thank you so much for your contribution.
Pleasure, guys. Bye.